All right, well, let's get into it. So,
All right.
today, guys, I got Justin White. He's he's well known in the CTSV world. That's where I first saw you, is CTSV forums and the infighting in that group of what tuner is the king this month, and the infighting is just insane in that community. And for people that know me, know that like I kind of gravitate towards that community. It's kind of like the mothership drawn, like that's where I kind of started in the cars, LSAs and stuff like that, and a lot of time with Jeremy at Faster Proms and hanging out with him. So I like that community a lot, but man, it's toxic. But I do like it.
But it wasn't always that way. You know, when I first got into it, it really wasn't that bad. The first one out was really Rick Crawford. He was out there kind of
still a legend in the LSA.
Absolutely. Oh, he's got it covered now. I mean, there's no competing with him. You can't compete with that blower. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, he's 12 o'clock in his car.
Yeah.
3,800-pound G8.
But back then, you know, I'd been tuning for quite a while till then, but I never really pushed into like one platform real hard. And that's the first platform I was like, this is what I want. This is what I like. Respect the car. And I mean, they make power so easy.
Yeah.
That was back when we didn't believe in ported blowers or anything. And we were running 990s, 10.0s with just upper pulley injectors in the 85.
Now, you didn't believe in them, or the community
I didn't think it did anything.
Interesting.
A lot of people did, but we were faster than anybody with those mods.
Yeah.
And we didn't have a gutted out car or anything like that. It was a guy, Evan Clark, and he loved the track. Mm-hmm. And we just kept pushing it, changing fuels, playing with stuff. And I mean, 990 with a car that was still like 4,400 something pounds.
Yeah, and fairly new-ish at the time. Like, not, you know, now they're so tried and true.
Yeah, there's so many combos now. You can be like, just do this.
Yeah. I know. Anybody that's doing something like, you know, you just want like a regular street car CTSV and you're like going to do something unique and like, you know, you're going to do a custom grind cam. It's all such a waste when there's so much info on that car.
The cam thing's going to be something that it's I guess it's more I was told forever ago, and I give credit, it's about 7 or 8 years ago. I was told what cam was the best cam for a PD blower by Rick.
Yeah.
And the specs were just weird. And I'm like, is he setting me up or what? So I didn't listen. I worked with Thule, and when I went to the BT, that same car, we put the stage 3 cam in it, and the 60-foot went from like a 1.3, I think we were doing 1.36s, to like a 1.45. And I'm like, hey, something's wrong. And he's like, well, if you can get data from some cars, we'll adjust the cam accordingly. So I took 50 cars, 50 CTSVs worth of data, going to the track, running it, writing their mods down, made a list, and they did the BTR3 torque, which, funny enough, had more exhaust, less intake. I don't know how he came up with that, but that's what he calculated.
Yeah.
So it trended towards what Rick had told me to run, which was like a 217, 240 or something like that. Mm-hmm. So if you think about that and you look at all these other cams, you're like, that doesn't make any sense. And why would he tell you that?
Yeah.
But so that cam trended towards that. And that
so
cam,
he was kind of right off the kick.
Oh, he was 100%.
You wanted to make sure you got your own data.
I'm just embarrassed to say that it took me 7 years to actually apply it properly.
Yeah.
But so we trended towards it. That cam did really well. I mean, we did some really fast cars. I think we were running 920s with that cam, with a ported blower, things like that. It wasn't until I got into the LT stuff that I was like, man, all these cams that everybody runs, they put these massive cams in these cars. And I was just thinking back on that cam. And I called Rick one day. I'm like, hey, what are your thoughts? Because I know he was doing testing with Brian Thule at their research area. Mm-hmm. And I had went and visited Thule a couple times and went over some R&D with him. And I'm like, man, we should try that cam. So I picked up 3 cams from different known cams that everybody runs. And then I had 3 cams from Thule, and I put them on an engine dyno with an LT4. I think it was a ported blower, bolt-on deal. And that stage 1 cam that he had, which was the 217, 230, 240, whatever it is, destroyed everything.
Huh.
I mean, by a lot.
And who's doing the cam specking at Thule at the time. Is it Brian?
It's Brian.
Okay.
But I
didn't know he did
that cam came out after Rick was there.
Oh, okay.
So Rick was working with him, and I guess together, that was one of the designs they come out with.
Mm-hmm.
So I had his 1, 2, and 3. The Stage 2 dropped 30 horsepower. The Stage 3 dropped, I think, another 10 or 15.
Sounds like they should reverse those
Right.
those numbers just a little.
So once I did the testing, I didn't post any of this online because I mean,
still good drivability.
I pulled the motor out of a
assume.
car. I paid for it. I was just tired of just giving away info, and people didn't listen anyways. I was like, whatever. The drivability is phenomenal because it's a very small cam.
Yeah, and it's a stock converter on those deals, right?
For the most part,
A lot of them, yeah.
Yeah, for the most part. My car has a converter in it because I deal with Circle D, and they were like, "Here's the new hotness," and I'm like,
Try
"All right,
something
cool."
out.
But so Thule's reservation was, man, if you don't have any intake, he's like, I think it'll work good, and I know what you're seeing on the dyno, but in the real world. So I have a Stingray, and it's got a 2650 on it. He's like, well, you put that big blower, that might be a problem. And I said, okay, well, let's find out. Well, that car makes like 1,200 wheel, and it runs mid threes, 60 to 130. And it's a full weight, 3,800 pound Stingray with nothing fancy. It's a rod and piston motor.
Is that thing really that heavy?
Yeah.
Shit, I didn't realize that.
Yeah. Well,
Why is
Pardon
Chevy?
me.
Why is Chevy so bad at that?
I think they were just trying to make it. I think they were making up for the terrible interior on the C6. So they went
they
a little
just-
extra fancy on the C7. I mean,
maybe.
if you ever hear the audio system and all in those cars, I mean, that's got to be some of the weight.
Yeah.
That's killer.
I just can't. Oh my god! Come on, Chevy.
I don't know why they're so heavy. We'll get into the disappointments in Chevy because now that I'm stepping into the
You got 3
to
hours
the BMW world, I got whatever time I need.
for the disappointments in Chevy.
Well, I mean, I've been a Chevy guy forever.
Same.
And I love Chevrolet. I think it's a fantastic company. I love their products. I love everything about it. But then now that I'm going into the BMW side, and I'm just like, man, we dropped the ball.
I think
Bad.
to touch on the V2 again, I think the Gen 2 CTSV was peak Chevy on the simplicity, the build, the car itself. I don't think. Yes, they have better cars now, but I think they peaked on everything on that car, and then some things have fallen off.
Dollar for mod, and stand by it. There is no better GM car than a V2.
Yes.
I mean, take my wife's car, for example. Stock diff, stock drive shaft, stock axles, a shaft in the trans, but stock clutches, a rod and piston motor, 4,500 pounds, and it run 850 at 165 with a terrible 60-foot because we were fighting getting off the line. I mean, all that stock component and stock suspension.
Yep.
Because
It's
the mag
stupid. It
ride,
doesn't make sense.
And we beat that car.
And I'm not just
heavily.
saying that because I have one in my garage.
Right. Well, because you've got everything. You got import and domestic in one.
Yeah, but I have a V2, so I'm not just saying that because I have a V2.
I mean, you
They are
can't
just-
argue it though.
They are just that good.
Cast iron diff. The axles are really good. The only issue we had with the axles, was leaving in first. If that boost came in too fast on the 1-2 shift, it was
But
I
even
was
as
chasing
far
bearings.
as like comparatively to the V3, simplicity on the tuning side and the modification side, you don't have to deal with direct injection. You don't have to put like all kinds of bullshit there. Like you just put bigger injectors in it. You just simply do it. You start to lose that on the V3.
Well, the V3 having the LT motor and the direct injection far superior.
Yes.
The issue, for some reason, becomes there's something in that platform, and I still don't really know what it is, that they're just not fast compared to like what you do to a V2. An 800 horsepower V2 is going to run, mid-low nines. An 800 horsepower V3 is going to run like a 990.
Yeah, that's so crazy.
It's weird, and they're not heavier. They're 4,200 pounds, so they're 200 pounds lighter. I'm not sure. They're doing some 10-speed swaps now, and I think that might be it.
Yeah.
But for some reason, it's like they made a really nice chassis. It's a beautiful car, but they
even,
just
like-
missed the mark where the V2 just solidified it.
Yeah, but even like the LSA ZL1 at the time, like it's kind of faded into oblivion a little bit.
Well, that's
Maybe
the
they
other
didn't
thing.
make enough.
So we go to all these Cadillac Attack event, right? The one here.
Yeah,
And ZL1s are allowed.
great event.
But mod for mod, they get destroyed. And I don't know why.
Like the same build across the board. They're the same trans, same engine, same
but
everything.
They're always slower by a lot. People ask me, and I'm like, I don't know the answer to give you because to me it doesn't make sense. I mean, we're talking the same diff ratio, similar size chassis. It's not like one's a lot shorter or one's a lot longer, and I'm pretty certain the Cadillac's even heavier. But they're always faster.
I would hope it's heavier,
right? But with GM, you never know.
Yeah, I would hope that like their pinnacle sports car, whatever muscle car at the time, was lighter than what Cadillac could do. It's almost like one of those things. Like Chevy in itself at the time was probably not happy that Camaro engineers were probably not happy with the V2 because they were like, you kind of took our thunder.
It's kind of like back in the day with the Corvette and the Grand National.
Exactly.
They were like, oh, did we do that? Damn.
Yeah.
But
they weren't able to ruin them in any way.
Right.
In the Grand National, they were able to kind of they were kind of fake it a little bit.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's weird how that worked out, and I may be hyping up the CTSV here, but they really deserve their credit.
But I mean, what other car can you do, the little mods to that are going to run like that? And not only run like that, they're going to run like that forever.
Yeah.
Again, my wife's car, 1,400 horsepower car, there's almost 40,000 miles on that build. How? What other car does that?
Especially now when you look at current market prices on them, and they're like
that
25 to like 40 for like a really nice one. And
that's
you're
where
like,
the community went, I think.
Oh, yeah.
As soon as they dipped under 20s, and I even said that. I said, as soon as they dip under 20s, I'm going to move forward. And I don't want to because I loved V2. I stayed with them for about 5 years. I mean, obviously I tuned a lot of other stuff at the same time, but when it came to that chassis, that's what I did. And as soon as it dipped under 20, I started looking into the Gen 5 stuff a little harder because I had been doing some Gen 5, but I never really pushed on that platform because it was super complicated, and I felt like they were already doing pretty well. Didn't realize how much was left on the table at that point. But once I did that, I'm like, maybe 2-3 months later, after seeing a bunch of them in the 20s, you just saw the community degrade.
Yeah.
Everybody has their homie of the week kind of deal.
Yep.
And it doesn't. I remember back when you go to the track and whoever's winning, that's the guy on top. Now it's like if he's your buddy, that's the guy. I'm like, well, where are the cars at the track? Well, that doesn't really matter. I'm like, kind of.
Yeah, I mean,
it kind of does.
I think time slips are pretty important in my opinion, or at least dyno numbers, at least at the bare minimum.
And lately, it's not. It's so weird. It's such a weird world now that I guess I'm getting old now.
The sound of the cam is what puts you on top, maybe.
And the worst thing is, I've always said this from the jump, was if it chops hard, it's slow. Mm-hmm. Every PD blower, if it chops, and it's not like made into the tune, well,
that's why
slow.
Cadillac Attack was such a unique ability to have an event like that, because there's so much like beef and infighting in the group to bring them all together, and even like who ported the blower, and like, is it Kong, is it Jokers, is it like who is it from? That
was a big thing too. So once we started messing with the ported blowers, we were seeing a little gain, but the competition, I think the main reason I didn't believe in them first, right, was because first, they weren't faster than we were already going. Mm-hmm. Second, they were having a lot of issues failing. So I think the next few years, probably 2 years, they really started getting good. And people were making claims of 50, 60 wheel. So I actually did a test, because I do a lot of R&D stuff, even if we don't post it. But I made this one public. I did a live. We put a V2 on the dyno, and we swapped the blowers on the dyno.
Yeah.
And we had Modern Airflow?
Yeah.
Like, they weren't even known in the community at all. And they called me 2 days before, and they're like, hey, we'd like to put our blower in the mix. And I'm like, well, you got like 2 days to get this done. He goes, we'll drive from Houston and do it. And subjectively, they did win. The problem that their blower made less power up top was because they literally drained the car of fuel. It didn't have enough fuel to keep up with that blower.
Yeah.
And it was a good 50 over everybody else's blower over the whole curve.
Interesting.
Which is crazy because we even weighed the blowers to see how much material was removed. And it was the heaviest blower. So that really puts in perspective that it's not how much you can get out of that blower.
Yeah.
You see the big hogged out blowers. This thing looked almost like a stock blower. I don't know what they did with it.
Gasket on the throttle body anymore, and all
Yeah.
RTV everywhere.
But we put it on there, and I'm like, man, this is insane. And unfortunately, Joker at the time sent a blower in, but it had a leak between the cases, case and the snout. And then he sent a blower the next day. So we wanted to try to make it apple to apple because it was in a AC shop, as controlled as it could get, but it rained the next day. And I tried to explain that, and I'm like, do you still want me to run it? And he's like, yeah, man, just run it. And it didn't do so well, but it's like, you got to understand, water doesn't compress. It's a big thing. I think people look at DA and they look at that, but they don't think about water drain.
Yeah.
And that's big on a blower.
Talk to a nitrous guy. He'll tell you all about it.
Well, that's where I learned it was Justin Shearer. I was at the track with him, and they were running their CTSV, and I had my blue one, and he pulls this thing out, and he's like swinging it in the air, and I'm like, what are you doing? I was like, I know I sound ignorant, but what is that? He goes, and he showed me. It was like water drain meter and everything. Yeah. And I was like, well, what do you do with it? He explained the whole process, and I'm like, man, that is wild.
So for people that heard that name, it's Big Chief.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I know some people are probably like, oh, that name's familiar, but
yeah.
takes a second maybe to put it together. Yeah, and Jackie has a CTSV now. It has like a freaking small block Ford or something in it, or something weird. I don't know.
He's wild.
Yeah.
That whole rear setup they did on that car.
It's badass.
Yeah.
That thing sits real good.
But a lot of people try to downplay that car, and he was doing the tuning himself. I think at one point he had somebody helping him, and then he was doing it himself. And I went to his shop one night. He invited me over there, and I kind of talked with him, went over a couple things that I do with him, and he adjusted the tune. And I mean, that car was fast. That car went 8s on a stock blower.
Yeah.
And everybody was like, oh, he was spraying it. I'm like, even if he was, which I don't think he did, who cares?
Yeah.
It was a stock bottom end. Problem was they had changed the pistons because I think they may have had a failure at some point, but it was still stock rods and pistons, and that thing was flying. But I guess because of who he is, nobody wanted to give him credit, and that kind of sucked.
Yeah, I can kind of see that, and I mean the car now is completely different, no prep deal, so it's like
that's why he did that, I'm sure.
Yeah,
because he was like, because of the community, just how everybody turned out. Because even back in the day, like I said, I was in the V community and the LSA stuff. Rick had already been in it probably 2 years before I got into it. And he was willing to help give info, and he's always been pretty helpful. And we talk back and forth, and I always dealt with everybody. Nowadays, anybody that's really tuning that platform, they all act like they have some kind of secret, like we weren't doing this 5 years ago. Some of our cars that we ran 5 years ago, they're still not even close to catching those.
From my understanding, one of Rick's secrets on all of that is RPM.
RPM and the blower.
Spin things fast.
The blower.
Spin a lot of RPM on the engine, spin a lot of RPM on the blower.
Yeah.
Spin it fast.
And he puts a lot of time in the chassis.
Yeah. Yeah, the chassis works well. I mean, I did see him rip the whole rear end out of the thing, but he does put
Yeah.
It was pretty cool. It didn't look. I'm sure it didn't feel cool to him, but it made for some cool pictures.
But he's I guess the way I explain it, and we were talking about this yesterday, like the drag and drive guys. They're a different type of gangster. You got a lot of guys that are like, oh, they're dedicated, stuff like that. We had a Cadillac attack. They heard a motor at Cal's house. So Rick drives through the night, goes to his house, pulls the motor out of his car, drives back, puts it back in the car, wins the event.
Yeah.
I'm like, those people you could try to compete with them, but you better just be friends with them.
Well, he did the same thing at World Cup when he kicked the rear end out of it.
That's what I'm saying.
Broke the drive shaft. He went and welded it back up, welded new.
Most people would be like, man,
it.
that is terrible. That's just, it's done. And he's just like, it's a couple hours of work. I'll get it done. I'm like, jeez.
Yeah, that's a lot. It's dedication to it for sure.
Yeah.
And especially because a lot of, he doesn't seem like he has a whole lot to gain from that dedication. Like, a lot of tuners and a lot of people maybe in, your position, they run these cars because that's their marketing. They have a lot to gain from running that car specifically. And that's a lot about that's the whole reason why anybody gets these new platforms. That's the whole reason people are pushing C8s. That's the whole reason people are pushed ATSVs is just
right.
Be the guy.
But I think where most tuners nowadays, instead of actually spending the time on the platform before they start tuning them, they come out the gate trying to tune everybody's car.
Yeah.
And in the Gen 5 world, it's knocked a lot of them on their ass. So, when I started messing with the Gen 5, I took about a year with a C7Z and a V3. So a year of just testing parts, playing with the tuning, moving stuff around, figuring out what was working. But we never really pushed hard in that market because we were still doing the V2s. When we moved to the C7 market and I started doing a lot of retuning from the local guys, we were gaining 100, sometimes 200 horsepower. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, how?
With just a laptop?
Well, already tuned, literally leaving the dyno from the other tuner. They would come over and we'd go to the dyno it, and then retune the car. That's how far they're missing the mark. When you're missing the mark by 100, 200 horsepower,
yeah, you're leaving a lot on the table.
Either you don't care or you're just not willing to put in the time to figure out what it wants.
Yeah, I feel like if I saw somebody with those kind of results, if I was that other tuner, I'd probably potentially hang it up.
Well, and for the specific guy, I'm not going to mention who it was, just for,
No need.
Right. But anyways, I had messaged him and I was like, hey man, I'm getting a lot of cars that are coming from you and I'm making big gains. Something's going on. I feel like this is the issue. If you have an issue, let me know. I don't mind. I work with tuners all over the place. I would love for somebody to help me, so I don't mind helping them.
Yeah.
And he was like, I don't really need your help. I said, okay.
Did this tuner used to be in Florida? Okay.
Used to be in Houston.
Yes. Noted.
Not anymore.
Noted. He tuned Garrett's C7.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
it's
yeah.
funny how quick you picked that one up.
Like I told you, I've been in this community. Yeah.
But that's the thing. It's like, everybody, when I moved back to Houston, everybody, that's the guy. This is it. This is it. And they were like, these cars are fast. They're outbeating everybody. And then I redid one car and he went out and it was just a slaughter fest. And then I did another one and slaughter fest. And I'm like, this is really bad for him.
Yeah.
And I, like I said, I tried to be nice and I was basically told to piss off. And I'm like, bet. No problem.
No good deed goes unpunished, right? That's how it works.
But a lot of them, they were using the same big cam, and it worked. But once we did that testing, even Brian, he did the testing too, and I sent him the results of this, and his whole cam line has changed. If you look at what it used to be and look at it now, it's all pretty much mimicking what Rick had told us to do 7 freaking years ago.
Well, it's important too for a lot of tuners, especially a tuner that's been doing it for a long time and started tuning early LS stuff. You got to start evolving with the times, and if your tuner's really not keeping up with things, you got to be worried a little bit. The person that tunes my car, Alpha, he tunes any car somebody would bring him, and he's well known for it.
Yeah,
and it's pretty well trusted because I'll watch him tune he'll be sitting in my car tuning a Pro EFI with Motec on the screen and then switch to remote tuning somebody's AM Infinity.
At some point, he put in that time to make sure that he was mastering his craft.
Exactly.
A lot of these guys, they'll get an HP tuner and they bought that Pro cable. They're a pro. And man, they've built a reputation off of it. It's crazy. Some of these guys, another one that in the V community, I got a file the other day. Guys here, check this out, see what you think. I'm like, it's 10.0 air fuel. I'm like, I think that's pretty far off.
Yeah.
And he goes, no, he said that's what it needs to be. I'm like, surely that can't be true. So he sent me the text message, and I'm like, sadly, this is the 4th, 5th time I've seen this, but if you go on the forum, that's the man.
Yeah.
No cars at the track, never at a race event, ever. Nothing that I've ever, they might have 1 or 2 cars that look kind of impressive, but they're, in the grand scheme of things, it's not. But you go on the forum and that's it. You go on Facebook, that's it. So to me, that was my sign of clearly this is not what I want to deal with, because I want to deal with the guys that want to go to the track or want to, they want to be the fastest ones out there, not, to the point of hurting things, but to the point of reliable and running properly.
Yeah. So to talk about special vehicles from Chevy a little bit, it seems like all the rest of them past the V3 have really fallen on their face. Like the Blackwing, you don't really see much Blackwing talk. You don't really see much ATSV talk. You may, because you're more in the community, but I don't see
I thought the
any of
Blackwing was going to be like the bee's knees, to not sound too old.
Yeah.
Because it's a V3. It's, I believe, a little lighter as well. It comes in a manual.
It's got all the carbon.
I'm more of like, I'm excited to come with a 10-speed, but it come with a manual. It's a luxury SUV. This thing is phenomenal, and I haven't seen it pick up either. But I believe their Global B, which was just unlocked. So maybe it's building, but...
True, because Global B was unlocked in the last few weeks, right?
I think it's been a few months now.
Okay, because it's starting to slowly trickle out.
A trend that I've noticed, and HP tuners may disagree, but I feel like they're so focused on unlocking so many different things that most of these files are lacking a lot of things. This was back in the 6-speed days. A lot of the 6L stuff people have trouble with.
Yeah.
I've never had trouble, but the reason I haven't had trouble, and the reason I was able to do so well, was working with Circle D. They put pressure sensors in the valve body, and we could actually see what these settings were really doing.
Yeah.
And they really scienced it out before me, and I worked with them and learned from them and taking them apart and having the ins and outs.
Were you using an external logger to see what the gears were doing, and then we're able to transfer that into HP tuners?
On another HP tuners dropped the ball. Remember, we used to have 5 inputs. Mm-hmm. Now we don't.
So not just dropped the ball, they actually took away...
And claimed that they were going to give us that back, which they haven't. So they're slacking. But I think, like I said, it just seems to be their goal. And I get it. They're getting really big. They're growing really fast. But
I'm sure they have an external source of pressure that's larger than any known source of pressure in the history of the world. I'm sure there's this looming thing pushing down on them.
But that can't hurt them from, giving us the inputs back.
You should be able to put a sensor.
But that's what we used. And basically there was many times where I would find tables in the 6L that didn't do what they said they did. And people explain it like, oh, well, this does this and this is why. And what they're explaining will get you close.
Yeah.
But it will never get that trans 100%.
Interesting.
And I've even emailed and been like, hey, this table doesn't seem to actually do this, and this is why, to get no reply.
Yeah, well, I've often wondered, the same guy that can unlock and write software is probably not the same guy that can tune a car.
Not always.
You know what I mean? The crossover there, that's two different skill sets to be able to write software. But when you have a guy
out there that's willing to tell you this,
you would think
that they'd be like, absolutely, let's do that. Let's make our product better. So we figured out the 6 speeds. We had enough tables to make it work. That's why that whole platform was working good. So we moved to the 8-speed. You can't adjust how it shifts at all. The 8-speed, a lot of people are like, oh, that's a killer 8-speed tune that you're doing. I'm like, that's the engine side. That has almost nothing to do with the trans.
Really?
We move a little bit of pressure, a little bit of shift time down. That's it. There's no oncoming, no offgoing. There's no inertia factor adjustments. There's nothing. You can turn torque management on and off. You can add some pressure, pull some pressure, and command a different shift time. That's it.
So we got worse as we got newer.
Significantly worse.
Yeah, so that's probably a lot of why.
They have on the operating system 1516 Corvette. I don't know if you ever driven one of those and you go to put it in drive and it's a delay, and then boom, it hits.
Yeah.
So you'll notice that doesn't happen until you tune them. So I was like, man, I was always told it was something in the trans or something like that, but I build transmissions and I work with Circle D on it, and it's not. It's 100% not. We went and changed every part on my car because we were destined to figure it out. They said it was the dual check ball in the front pump cover, so I put that in there.
Who said that?
Just different people on the transmission building pages.
It's like HV tuners say that?
No, just different people on the pages in the
interesting.
trans build stuff saying that this is what's doing it. But I'm like, you're not understanding the difference. Is if I don't flash it and it's a bone stock car, it won't do that. As soon as I flash it, it does it. If you clear the transmission adapts, it goes away for a while, and then it slowly comes back.
So there's like a ghost.
So there's
in there.
clearly an issue here.
Yeah.
It's a well-known problem. Well, here we are, 5, 6, 7 years later, and we got nothing. These cars have been having these issues since 2016. So that's another case of it just feels like they dropped the ball. Randomly, the converter will unlock in fourth gear on a wide open pull. Nothing you can do. Doesn't matter what you do in the tables. There's a way to do it mechanically to fix it, but you can't fix it in the software for some reason, and they don't all do it.
That's probably good if you're like, racing and you're like round 2 and 3 and.
Well, that 4-5 shift, that gear change is really bad. So imagine you're locked up third, you shift to fourth, it unlocks, and then a short shift to 4-5 is terrible. But imagine the converter's unlocked, and then it goes to fifth, and it locks the converter back. That's when you hear them, bah, bah.
Yeah,
That's what you're hearing.
Down the whole, especially on a blower car. You really don't want to just throw a ton of load at it at high RPM.
So if you can keep it locked in fourth, right, it runs so far out that on like my car, if you hear it racing, it's bah, da, da, fourth to fifth, no problem.
Yeah.
But my converter's locked the whole way through. But I'm having to do that mechanically because I can't get, HP Tuners is not interested in fixing it. And I'm like, okay, I'll put that off to maybe the trans is not as common. Ford didn't go with it, so maybe that's why.
And for people that don't know, there's really not another option to tune a car.
Right. I've heard some people say they're using EFI Live on them, but
yeah,
man, I don't think I've ever touched an EFI Live.
I don't know anybody. I feel like if I showed up at a tuner and he broke out EFI Live, I'd be like,
Yeah, you'd be like, man.
I don't know.
Were you born in the 60s?
Yeah, they'd be like, oh God, you going to bring out your screwdrivers?
I know that EFI Live, I think their big thing is they allowed user-defined parameters first, which HP Tuners now does have. So you can kind of break out the code and define your parameters in the actual file if you can find an A2L document for GM, which is not going to happen.
But if somehow,
and if somebody has it and they want to send it.
Yeah, if somebody at GM has these files.
Yeah.
Isn't that how the files normally appear? They fall off a truck in a way.
I think that's kind of how it works. Or you got to have somebody that's in the factory that's making the PCMs. But that's how the Germans do it. It's got to be somebody over there is getting the documents, because I've got A2L documents for the BMW stuff, and it's all in German. And it's 24,000 pages.
I've always kind of wondered, like, is somebody at GM or BMW, like, kind of corporate knows that they're, like, slipping this out because they know it's to the benefit of the market, but they can't be the ones that allow it.
I'm 100% convinced that BMW has to know at this point.
Like,
because if you notice, it seems like the BMWs are getting easier to get into the tune. I'm not going to say easier to get into the tuning, because a tune file for GM is at the most, 1,000 tables? A tune file for BMW is 6,100 tables.
Oh, wow.
And that's not even fully defined out.
Yeah.
So, but they have these documents, the A2L, which is just a document that literally goes over the entire strategy of the PCM, how it works, what sensors it references, basically what every line of code is going to do and how it's going to function in the PCM. But for GM, you can't find that. And it just seems like GM's trying to lock it more and more and more. We know why.
Yeah, I don't think they want to, though. I think they're pressured to.
That's what I was talking with Aiden earlier today, and he's like, well, it just doesn't seem like beneficial to them, right? Because if they would want you to be able to access it, but I think that it's got to be the government basically pushing on them, making them lock these things down. But they've got to know it's killing the market.
Well, that's how I feel, because, if they see BMW suddenly are growing in popularity, and you look at that, because they have eyes as well, and you're like, oh, well, they're growing because people can modify them. They want a piece of that. They're in business to sell. They're in business to raise their stock price. They want a piece of selling those.
Well, but the only thing that really gets me on, say, for GM side is, if you remember, Dodge was the hard one to tune before. You couldn't get into a Dodge to save your life. And GM was cake. Now it's like kind of reversed. GM is really locked up, and Dodge is like, come and get it. So, but the Dodge stuff, I mess with the Hellcats a little bit. The transmission, I mean, if you compare the GM trans, because most of the GM stuff, we're just making the adjustment that we know is going to work, but the tables aren't defined properly, in my opinion.
Yeah, just a mislabeling
Dodge,
issue more.
You tell it to do something, it does it. Immediately. It is probably one of the most responsive transmissions I've ever messed with.
Same on HP tuners still.
That's using HP tuners.
Yeah.
Yeah. That 8-speed is, I had the community kills the Dodge. I had a factory wide body, and I wanted to do a 60 to 130 just to see what it runs. You know what they run factory?
No.
Take a guess. 700 horsepower car, right?
60 to 130. I'll be honest. When people start talking about 60 to 130, I check out.
It's a good metric because they actually have.
It is a good metric, but for my brain, I'm just like, I think a time slip. I only can think in time slip.
So
I don't own a Dragy.
A pretty fast car is in the 5s.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a really fast, 1,000-ish horsepower car. 4s, 3s are like, you got a little over 1,000 and you can make that car work.
Okay.
It's very hard. They run 9.6s. That's like 2 seconds slower than a stock Mustang.
Yeah, why are they so slow?
I don't know. So what I did, I'd made a post because when I first ran that, I'm like, man, this is weird. Maybe something's wrong with the car. Mm-hmm. So I get in a little Dodge chat on Facebook because I was gonna move into doing some more Hellcat tuning because I did it in the past and I just didn't really. I was really focused on the V2. So I was gonna offer it to try to kind of.
It's a big market.
So I make this post and. Instead of a reply of that's what they run or this, it was you can't drive, bring it back to the dealer, maybe you can't handle the power. And I'm like, clearly you did no research on who you're talking to here. What could you
have done wrong?
That's what I'm saying. I'm like, I literally pressed the pedal to the floor. I even started at 40 to try to make the best I could get
some run-ups.
So with that said, I was like, okay, I'm already losing interest in this. But I started to mess with just the trans, not the engine side yet. I just wanted to see, because if you feel the trans on one stock, and you deal with transmission stuff a lot, you're like, man, this thing is really, really terrible.
Well, Dodge has always been known to chatter your teeth on a shift. Their trucks do it. When it shifts, you bite your tongue a little bit because it kind of like...
Yeah.
Well, it like hits you.
It's a lot of... There's so much torque management in there. And the shift timing, for some reason, it's just... maybe they're doing it like that on purpose, to where the first clutch just doesn't release fully. And then once the other clutch is coming on, it releases and gives you that little pop. So I fixed that, cleaned that up, cleaned up the shifts, fixed some shift timing, not touching the engine, went 8.5. There's that much in that transmission.
Do you think they were just trying to tame down the potential of it spinning the tires when people floored it to try to help people? Well,
it would spin worse.
Yeah.
I had bigger issues because when I was trying to do the 60 to 130, that shift was so like delayed and like a...
Yeah, like unsettled the car.
Right. It would knock the tires off. And then once I fixed the shifts to where they were nice and clean right through, the car went over a second faster and didn't knock the tires at all. So... But when I started looking at like a lot of the Hellcat files and stuff, because they're factory wideband cars, and that's where I think the, call it what you want, lazier tuners are sticking, because most of them leave the transmission stock. And I get that it works because the adapts work and the trans is phenomenal. But if I was able to gain a second on a stock car, what do you think would happen if somebody really pushed that platform? But the problem is the community. They're just if you think anything's cultish, they are passing Kool-Aid around out there.
I mean, now it's Dodge is going to be irrelevant in the next 2 years. Their new cars, their CEO's gone. They've phased out
which sucks.
They phased out the V8s, and now they've included...
When they come out with the Hellcat, I mean, I don't care if it wasn't as impressive after as it was, but the way they brought that car out, I'm sure you were watching when they brought that thing out. I was like, that thing just wheelie on the stage? Mm-hmm. Like, whoever is at Dodge just gives no fucks at all.
Even when they brought out the 170, and they dropped it at a drag strip and
Right.
you know,
I mean, that was crazy.
put the fake time on the board.
It gave a lot of false hope of what the future was going to be, because we're sitting here thinking like it's definitely going to go electric, and eventually it's going to. Whether you feel good about that or not, it will be there. But it was just a little bit of hope there. But then the community is just so weird, and you got maybe 2 guys that they'll all use, and then you got, as I mentioned before on another podcast, Bailey's. If you ever go to any heavyweight classes, they're there.
Yeah.
And the guy that tunes for them, his name is ZH, and he doesn't really tune for the public. But he's obviously phenomenal, because you go to these heavyweight races and they're running 7s back to back. And then what do you normally see Hellcats run? Maybe into the 9s. I mean, maybe into the 8s, mostly in the 9s.
They have the potential though. Like they gotta. I mean,
that's what I'm saying is that guy is obviously putting in the work and showing what these things can do. But the majority of the market is just let the wide bands handle it. Leave the trans stock. You know,
now I'm curious, because I've put a Dragy in my car once, and now I'm curious what it did 60 to 130. It was on a prep track. It makes well over 1,000.
A lot of people cry about that one, and it does make it a little faster, but who cares? It still did it. It still ran the time.
I've never ran the car not on the track.
Yeah.
What am I going to do? I mean,
yeah, that would be wild.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. 10 runs. It's been 298. That's the fastest 60 to 130. But that was also...
And that's rear-wheel drive, not all-wheel drive.
Yep, 2-speed.
Yeah.
But then it was a slow pass because it only went 830.
He says it was a slow pass.
Or it went 819 on that pass. So it wasn't that... Like, it wasn't good for the car.
So 290s on the street in a rear-wheel drive, I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm just saying I don't know how they're going to make that happen. The Vipers are doing it.
Yeah.
With the big wings. And the sequentials, they're doing it.
And traction control.
But they're just doing it.
Super intense Motec traction control that's just like constantly pulling power perfectly.
Like a car like mine, to get the 3.6 out of it, I mean, it was rough.
Yeah.
And that was just blower only, but I think even if I sprayed it, I don't know that I think I can go any faster, because I mean I was so on the verge of not dying, that I just, in the rear-wheel drive platform, you got to have some kind of management or something.
Yeah.
So that's a killer time. But then now you see Laser George at GTR, he's like a 1.9.
Yeah, that's nutty.
It's like what are you doing?
I know.
But
it's a cool metric, because drag strips don't give you that. You have to have a Dragy in it to get it. I often don't. I don't know how George always remembers to put a Dragy in his car when he's at the drag strip. I don't think about that one bit.
Because if anybody ever questions him, he will let you know how gangster he is.
I mean, he is. There's
right.
no question.
Well, some people don't know. Sometimes he has to be like, hey, hold tight. Let me show you something.
It is fun that they have a leaderboard. I do like competing on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Try to be the top of the Dragy leaderboard.
That's what we like to do. That we like to put it in there, because most of my customer is street. You do a lot more track stuff than I do. I like the street stuff. It's just where I've always been. I like the track too, though.
It's a location based for me. I'm 10 minutes from a drag strip.
Yeah, that's nice.
So it kind of like
we lost ours.
Yeah.
So
in Houston, you're saying, right?
Yeah.
That was a sad deal. I was there at that last TXT.
In Puerto Rico, I'll definitely be doing a lot more track stuff now. So
I know that they have one over there. Is it?
Yeah, Salinas. They have a 8th Mile as well in Arecibo. So that's up north, which I'm closer to the north.
Okay.
And I like 8th Mile a lot more. A lot of the guys there like the 1/4 mile, but I'm like, that's a lot of wear.
Yeah, if you got a fast car, you normally don't care about 1/4 mile.
Yeah.
That's kind of how it works.
But they're bred different out there.
Is there a lot of GM stuff down there?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Like a lot of the late model GM stuff made it that way?
We've got four or five C7 ZR1s out there. We broke the bolt-on record with the first one I ever did out there. And the weather's like 2,500 DA on a good day. The water grain's at least 120.
Yeah. Man, what a unique car that is, that GM made it for such a short amount of time, and they priced it so high.
And now it's twice.
They priced it high to begin with, and it did not budge.
No, they started at 140, and they're averaging 220s right now.
So weird.
But that car, a lot of people are C6 ZR1 diehards, and I always got to deal with that. C7 ZR1 is daddy. That car is, if you say that the C6 ZR1 is better, for its time, it was a phenomenal car. It's still a phenomenal car.
Mm-hmm.
That C7 is on a different level. But what's weird, so here's GM dropping the ball again. We got port injection, and we got direct injection. Works very well, seamless, other than the port injection controller doesn't see fuel pressure. Seems a little weird that you wouldn't want that to control the injectors.
Yeah, one would think.
Either way.
You would put a sensor on there.
So they do that, the LT5 blower, 2650. I mean, that car was really well set up.
Yeah.
The same blower on the Escalade V does not have port injection. So they spent the money to cast a different housing for the same blower just to not put injectors in it.
Mm-hmm.
But then the lid has the bolt holes where the rails would bolt to.
So they didn't recast the lid. They
Right?
just recasted the blower.
Well, the lid's a Cadillac lid. It's totally different.
Oh, it is.
But it has the spots for it, but then there's no spots for injectors. Do you think they recast the blower just to not have to put that controller on there? I just don't know. But a regular basic Mustang comes with direct import.
Yeah.
And wideband's.
Mm-hmm. What would it have cost GM on their $140,000 Escalade to put both?
This
Come on,
is
GM.
It's not like it's a cheap vehicle.
No, we're not building crank window,
But so it makes you think, it's like, do they want us to mess with the cars or do they not?
Yeah.
Do they? They're so back and forth.
They really have a very internal struggle on that because
It's got to be like two guys that just one loves performance and one got picked on by a Mustang or Chevy back in the day, and they just can't get it together.
I just don't understand because, like, in my mind, obviously I'm extremely biased, but you would think you want people to tinker with the cars as much as possible to get people to buy them. That just seems like the obvious answer.
Well, why else would you build a pony car? You know what they're going to do with that.
You hope they do that because you're delivering a slow car. Like, it, I'm sorry if, you got a base model V8 5th gen Camaro, but it is very slow out of the box, but it has unlimited potential. It should.
I was going to say.
It should.
That's a touchy one.
You know what I
yes.
mean? Like, it should have unlimited. Like, when you look at a Mustang at the
Copo.
track, it should have that potential.
Look at a Copo.
Yeah.
So that was my biggest struggle. So the V2 versus the L1 thing, right? People can put the Copo suspension, all that stuff swaps over.
Yeah.
And people do it. I've seen them do it, and they still get beat. I just feel like I like the 5th gen. I think it's a good looking car, but boy, what a flop.
Yeah.
Something is wrong in that chassis.
It doesn't make any sense. And it's the Alpha chassis. It's
which they've used on many other vehicles and had no issue.
Yeah. It's a well-known chassis. Like, it's pretty dialed in, but for some reason, they're just wrong.
Yeah.
And even when you go to the track, you'll see 1,000 Mustangs of the same year, and you may see a Camaro, and it may be all cut up and gutted, and it's going much slower.
Yeah.
And I don't understand it.
The 6th gen, I think they redeemed a good bit. I mean, to see a 5th gen go 5s in the 8th was like pretty rare. I think GPI had a few, Texas Speed had a few. I mean, we're talking like 5 total probably.
Yeah. Still, it's rare.
A 6th gen, it's normal. Mm-hmm. Like 5s is 550s, 560s they're doing NA.
Yeah.
And stock bottom end, they're going 580s, 590s, which is crazy. So something they did, and most of it, I think, obviously, is the LT because of how much more power potential it has. But, I mean, I'm sure they had plenty of power potential in these built motors they were putting in these other, 5th gens.
You would think an LS3.
But we're talking, I mean, I'm sure they were 15, 16 to 1 compression in those 5th gen cars to build that time. And 14 to 1 LT1 will slap that thing around.
Yeah, they made the 5th gen super obsolete when they came out with those cars.
Yeah.
They
made that, somebody made that bumper kit so you can confuse people and make the 5th gen look like a 6th gen, so.
Yeah, you can kind of trick them a little bit. GM tried. They did a couple facelifts here and there, but they're just, in my opinion, just not an enjoyable car to be in. I've never enjoyed the interior of them and the small windows and the long doors and stuff. And, like, the door's so long and so wide that you can't really get out.
Well, you can't see anything.
Yeah.
That was my biggest beef. I'm like, I can't see anything out of that car because I had a 5th gen, and I hated it because I could never see anything coming. And I didn't know, and it just wasn't. It felt like a tank. No matter what I did to it, it felt like a tank.
I think the C7s will really hold up the test of time and be looked at very favorably as the years go on.
So here's the next drop the ball.
Okay.
How many spider gears are in a diff?
Interesting.
In every diff ever made, how many spider gears are there? 2 or 4, right? 4 spider gears. Every diff made, the C7, 2. It's machined where the other 2 would go, but there's 2, and they shatter. First 2 times to the track with my car, a diff, and then an axle, and then another diff. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. And still today, Tim King, when he did the fastest C7, I watched him swap stub shafts and diffs 3 times, I think, in the parking lot. And he's like, it's just what it is. He tried to make 300M stubs. They were just a little too hard, I think.
Yeah.
And they would snap off. But that's the next thing, is we're losing stubs. The C6 didn't have that issue. Why does the C7 have that issue?
Yeah, how did
they
go
perfect
backwards?
the C6 diff? The C6 ZR1 diff was, I mean, man, we were making 1,500 on that diff with no problem.
Yeah, Leroy went 7s on it.
But the C7 diff, utter garbage.
Yeah. Do you think, because when they advertised the horsepower, what was it, like 490 or something? What did they, like when they...
Yeah, 485 or something like that.
Yeah, do you think that was one of those, like, we could get a little bit more rotating mass out of it, pick up a little bit more? Like, I mean, they do it at the motor anyways. I don't know. It's probably one of those stupid marketing things.
So the ZL1, the 6th gen, look at the spiders in that. There's 4, because, of course, it's cast iron. I know you can't do that in the vet, but whatever. The bevel on the gears makes them significantly thicker and stronger. The bevel on the spider gears in the C7 are real narrow. So it's like real pointy and then kind of big in the back, where the Camaro is more uniform all the way through the spider. And I have never seen one of those break. I'm not saying it can't happen, but, I mean, we put some pretty serious power through those things, never had an issue.
Do you think you blame the, supplier of that a little bit more maybe? I mean, because GM is kind of just like we buy parts from places on the trans side of things.
But it's not like it wasn't a known failure. I mean, stock cars were breaking these diffs. So you would think they would have done something about that. But with everything, I guess there's a trade-off. So, yeah, it may be a manufacturer issue, but once they found out about it, they've been making this thing for a couple of years now. The 19 diff, everybody says, is better. But I've taken apart both, and unless there's something in the metal, they look identical. The part numbers all match. It's all the same.
Well, they did a recall in the cooling system.
Well, that was another failure.
On the Z06s, they had to recall the cooling systems, right?
Yeah, but I mean, on a track-focused car, you would think that that's not going to be a problem. But the Stingrays, so we'll put the same heat exchanger and do the LT1 blower or LT4 blower on it, right? So the same cooler, same stuff in the front. They don't have that issue. Weird. My car runs 170 degrees, no problem.
Yeah.
Without a thermostat, with a factory thermostat, never got over like 210, 215. But a Z06, man, you put a heat exchanger in front, you're in trouble.
And they have all the more openings.
Way more. So I don't know enough on that one. I know they did do a fix for it, so that was cool.
Yeah, they did upgraded heat exchangers in the corners or something.
But it's just weird that the issues they have are. It's kind of like when they had the spark plug issue with the Ford stuff. It's like, y'all been putting spark plugs in heads for 50, 60, 70 years. How did you screw this up?
Well, even adding a 7th gear was kind of like a nothing.
Yeah.
Like, it didn't really...
Emissions stuff.
It's an emissions thing, but, like, it's kind of just...
I don't know. But then, like, on the Camaros, have you been in a lot of 6 gens, ZL1 stuff?
Quite a few.
You ever floor it? It feels like it's spinning, but it's not. And they sway.
I do know what you're talking about.
You grab the rear control arms on it, and I guess weight, whatever, call it what you want, but it's unsafe as it can be. You can flex the control arms. I mean, they're paper thin.
Yeah.
So I see they're trying to save money, but at the cost of what? You made a 600-something horsepower car that has control arms that are maybe 2 or 3 sheets of paper thick. So we got to swap all that out. So it just seems like GM is really not doing what they used to do.
They get really close on a lot of their things that they do, but what they fall like every car that GM ever made is like 80% perfect, and then there's like just those few things that you're just like, how did you come to this?
But the V2 was 90.
Yes,
I might argue 95.
I would agree with you.
So it's like they were doing good. The C6 ZR1, I'll go back to that. That was a good car.
Yep.
That car was solid. It may have, a Cavalier interior, but
the dipped carbon fiber is
and no Bluetooth.
tough
or
to look at.
Any of that, which that was weird too. The Cadillac didn't have Bluetooth.
Yeah.
I know that had to drive you nuts. I mean, that doesn't make any sense at all.
Even the screen is horrendous.
Yeah.
It's so good that it goes down, so you don't have to look at it because it's horrendous.
It's pretty bad.
Yeah. And thankfully, I don't really care about that. But man, when you see it, you're like, ugh.
Yeah.
It's got a stupid music note on there. When you look in the...
A hard drive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which my wife actually uses, weird enough.
Huh.
Got some good MJ on there,
Yeah. It's so weird.
It was just like the technology they were lacking so bad, but the chassis they were on point. Stuff was working, and then when they moved to these newer cars, they were like, well, let's get the tech fixed, and totally dropped it on the reliability or suspension. And again, I'm not saying that they're not killer cars for the most part, 80%.
Yeah.
But you did an LT1 that can't make 700 horsepower without melting a piston. They can. People are going to argue, I made 730. Whatever your dyno said, that's cool. But they won't hold it. Where you can take any LS engine and make 1,000 and not even think twice about it. So the LT4 will make 1,400. So that's, they did good on that. But then they put a 3-piece center main that falls out. How?
Yeah.
So it's like maybe the newer stuff, people are just worried that they're going to drop the ball in both categories.
I mean, it kind of looks like a lot like I've been pretty adamant about on the negative side, I guess, on the C8, where it's just lackluster.
Have you've driven Audis with DCTs?
Yeah.
So I have an A5. So basic bitch white A5.
Yeah.
Right. The trans in that, he had to go up like a slope to get to my shop. So I drive that, stopped it on the slope, put the code in, go back to driving normal, nice engagement. Everything feels great. I was doing a C8. I go out there, I park it on the thing, put the code in, go to drive. I thought it was going to rip the clutches out of that thing just to get going again. How? That thing's significantly newer.
Yeah,
Makes a lot more power, but it drives absolutely terrible. People are like, I think my C8 drives great. I'm like, drive an Audi.
Drives like an E-gear. Like old Lamborghini.
Yeah. Old Gallardo or something.
Yeah.
It's like, you better give that thing throttle or you're going to be in some trouble.
You're going to burn up the clutches in it.
But it's like, there's no way that they didn't know that was going to be a problem. And then the Z06s are dropping transmissions like crazy. I don't know anybody that has a C8 Z06 that hasn't lost a transmission already.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a buddy of mine, I think he made almost 2,000 miles.
Do you think they're killed by outsource on that?
I think
they have no control over the trans that they get.
That's what I think it's. Well, I don't know if I believe it's the trans. I think it's the control algorithm.
Interesting.
It's lacking.
Yeah.
And I know Fuel Tech at one point said that they have control of it now. Chris Delgado with Motec has control of it.
Yep.
But if we've got to go down those avenues, it's like,
yeah,
that doesn't make any sense.
If a car has a Motec or a Fuel Tech in a new car like this, it better be going deep sevens.
And they don't.
Like, I maybe I'm just my opinion here, but if you put that kind of effort into a car and the cost of doing a Motec system or a Fuel Tech on a new car, and you have to, I'm sure you're losing something. You're always trading off. To not be able to go sevens would be rough.
Yeah.
And that's
That's common. Just the C7 chassis, the 8-speed, the fastest 8-speed right now I think is a 8.1. Mm-hmm. But why? One, the 8-speed has a catastrophic explosion issue on the 2-3 shift sometimes because the basket has a bunch of holes in it and the shock just explodes it and it rips the case apart.
Oh, that's fun.
But that only happens if you can get the diff to live long enough to get down there. So, it's that. But then, like I said, the C8.
So when you let off, you're like, great, the diff didn't explode. And then you're kind of like...
On that 2.3, you better be ready. Yeah.
Good thing it's back there, right?
That's if you make it through the burnout without blowing the trans up.
Oh, okay.
That's the other thing. People, they do that pedal thing in the burnout for some reason. So they'll hit it in second. And then when it goes to 2.3, they'll let off, and it'll 2.3. And as soon as it goes to hit it, they'll hit back in it. Yeah. And boom, blows the trans all over the track. So another weird thing. Now, that's probably not GM. That's, whoever's making the trans, ZF or whatever. But, I mean, that's still kind of a stupid issue to have this far in.
Yeah.
Like I said, on the C8, I don't think it's a trans because I believe it's Datsun that messes with it. That's the same people that mess with the Audis. So there wasn't what's the issue with the control?
Oh, it's crazy, man. It's like there's so much good stuff, but it's so hard to get behind on our side of things because
I was genuinely excited for the C8 when I saw it had a DCT. I was like, man, this is going to be rear engine, which the looks are subjective. I think it's pretty ugly, but a lot of people like it and whatever.
Yeah.
Besides that, it's a rear engine or mid-engine. So you got that weight right there by the tires. You got a DCT. That car on paper should be ridiculously fast. But
so I was there at the launch of it. I went to Vegas and they unveiled it the first time, and they told us point blank, they're like, we got a 911 and we based it, we were trying to make it like, 911 turbo.
Boy, they missed that mark.
I was like, man, that's a big
They clearly
claim.
didn't drive the 911.
I was like, that's a big claim, guys.
Yeah.
Let's back it down a little bit.
But
maybe say you got a C7 and you were trying to make it as good.
Oh, we'll see on the diff.
Yeah. But that was like, and it was cool at the time. I thought the buttons were the stupidest thing I've ever seen in the interior, and I think that's a common claim. And they had great colors and stuff, and I was like, I get it. It's the future to put the engine back there. They told me the belt you never change. I was confused by that. They're like, it's an unserviceable belt. I was like,
the front belt?
Yeah, because they're like, you got to drop the motor to do it.
Jesus.
Yeah, I was like, they're like, it's not a wear item. It's like, since when is
I was about to say, when is a belt not a wear item?
When has a serpentine belt not been a wear item?
Well, then maybe they don't expect the car to make it to 100,000.
That's true. Maybe.
That could be part of it.
Yeah. Now they use those double-sided belts, I think, where they're ribbed on all sides. I'm like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, so it cracks both sides.
Yeah, and I think they even have dry sump on some of them, so it's driving even more things. And it's like, great.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not an engineer, but, man, some things are red flags.
They I don't know, man. It's just weird. But I guess one thing that I kind of wonder, and just I don't know exactly why. So the DCT has always been kind of the choice of the Euros and things like that. So the newer BMWs, the Supra and all that.
Yeah, like the B58 or whatever.
They went back to the ZF trans, the 8-speed. So I wonder why they did that, and then GM decides, let's go to what they used to use. I don't know. I feel like maybe there's something that the Germans figured out first.
Yeah.
And we're a little late to the party.
Because the ZF Trans is very proven.
Yeah, well, that's the Hellcat Trans.
Yeah.
That's the 8-speed. The 8-speed is strong. It does have its weird issues, like the catastrophic explosion issue.
And then the Corvette one is a little different, though, too.
Right. Well, they're all different versions of it. But,
yeah.
I mean, ZF dates back in Mercedes way back. Like, I don't remember the year, but 70s, 80s is where that actually started. So they're all a clutch-to-clutch based deal. I guess I'm probably wrong on it all being ZF, but I believe that's the way that works is called that.
Yeah, that's probably their ZF and then whatever other numbers after it. And there's probably BMW guys out there that really know.
ZF8HP and things like that.
Yeah, you talk to like RK Tunes and he's like, probably knows every single one.
Yeah, serialized.
Exactly, yeah. Somebody's got to know it.
But so the design's been around forever. BMW went to, they did DCT. I'm just curious why they went back.
Yeah.
And then GM has been doing the autos. And the 10-speed, the 10-speed in the GM is good. The 10-speed in the Ford is the issue.
That's weird. It's usually the opposite way.
Right.
That Ford
right.
has it a little more figured
Ford's
out.
algorithm, like on a 6R, people are like, oh, a 6R and a 6L. I'm like, no. A 6L will hold the power. A 6R will put it down the track.
Yeah.
The 6L, don't get me wrong, we've been very fast on the 6L, and Rick just went 7s on the 6L, but it wasn't without a lot of pain and a lot of years and a lot of struggle, and where Ford's been doing it, I don't know how long, forever.
Yeah,
I
there's
I think they've been 6s on that trans now.
Oh, yeah. There's 7-second ones all over the place. The 6 one, John Lund and those guys.
Yeah, mastered it.
What they're doing is awesome. It's very different than your regular one. Obviously, it goes 6s, but it's still the same transmission.
It's the same premise. The way the internals work, I think, is the other benefit. Where the 6L, it's multiple different stacks, different drums. Where the 6R it looks like a double Christmas tree, and all the clutches except for the 456 are the same size and the same clutch.
Yeah.
Where the 6L, there's 5 different types of clutches, and they all are different material for different reasons. And when we started really pushing them to get them in the 1600 horse. At Circle D, there is a room of clutches in different materials that through the years we were testing, and they've been testing 6L stuff forever.
Yeah.
They've got that. It's on lock. Like, they tell you this is what's going to work. Just take it to the bank. It's going to work.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those mythical arts is what's going on with fluid dynamics in a transmission and converter.
Oh, yeah. I thought the converter stuff was complicated, but so the same clutch material that's on the 35R, it's the biggest clutch in the 6L. The same material that's on that, I believe, and I was told that, Neil Chance, that's the material they use on their lockup converter.
Interesting.
So it's a good paper. It's a Borg-Warner green. So it's a very, very hardy paper. It works really well. So we were like, let's put that in the 456 because that's the one that fails. Didn't make it, but like 2 passes. Burned it right up. So it just shows you, like, once you change that diameter, the paper's different. So in my car it was making about 1700 wheel. I had no torque management on that trans, which is funny because everybody's like, you got to have torque management. I had a Holly. You didn't have that choice.
What, Holly didn't have the same algorithm as OEM?
Right. It's lacking a little bit, but...
There was no picture for that?
But so with that, I had the 3 to 4 shift, which was that 456 clutch, was about 100 milliseconds, 120 every now and then when I'd really start pushing it. Well, I couldn't really command it any faster. I tried everything to get it to shift faster. I couldn't do it. So I talked to Circle D. I'm like, hey, this is my issue right now. I need it to be 75, 50. I need it to be quicker because there's no power being pulled out. We don't want that clutch to slip because it's a real high metallic clutch. So I bring the clutches back to them, and you imagine like a Tic Tac. So imagine 4 of those set on the clutch and milled out on just the fibers.
Yeah.
And they handed them back to me. And he's like, let's do that. I'm like, what? 50 milliseconds on the nose. Who would have thought of that stuff?
Yeah.
Like,
that's just years
people don't
of
understand the
experience.
science that is behind this. Well, because a lot of people were doing so they'll be like, oh, well, the Power Glide, always ran the blue plates. I guess that was like a thing. The Power Glide doesn't work like that. Like these transmissions, they slip, apply. So people were taking that, and they're like, well, that's going to work great. And they'd put it in the 6L, and it'd last like 100 miles.
Yeah.
And they're like, what the hell? Those clutches were never meant to be slipped. They're shifted full pressure.
I just run regular-ass orange clutches in my Power Glide.
Because it doesn't slip apply.
It just...
But on these new transmissions, it's wild because the way they apply.
Yeah.
Another issue with the 8-speed, if you watch the pressures, the 4.5, after a while with the adapts, it'll shift the 4 to 5 to bring the clutch on, and then for some reason it drops the pressure and then reapplies. That's more of that slip that you hear when they're shifting that gear. What would be the benefit of that? I can't think of a single advantage of that. To get the clutch applied and then drop the pressure back and then reapply.
It just makes me wonder, like, why are these, like, they're smart GM engineers. They're intelligent people that wrote this in there.
You weren't a GM mechanic, were you?
No. Why are they not? Why are they not vocalizing any of this stuff? Why do you never hear any of it from a GM engineer that wrote some of this stuff? You'd think you would. You don't hear from Ford. You don't hear from Dodge guys. Like, are they on NDAs that are that spicy?
Well, so like a lot of the Dodge guys used to get into the forums, and I believe that's where the Hellcat came from. It's just a personal thing. Because you'd get on some of the Dodge forums. I'd get on all the forums because I like to learn everything.
Yeah.
And you'd see Dodge representatives get in there and be like, so is this what you guys are looking for? Like asking those kind of questions. And this was 2010s, 2012s. So they were obviously in there and they were answering questions of problems people were having. I'm like, man, why don't more manufacturers do that? And they may have, and I maybe missed it. But now would be the time for that. Ask
somewhere.
the customers what they want.
But they're somewhere. That guy that wrote that is somewhere.
Yeah, but there's just like the A2L documents. Anybody leaks that out, they're gone. They might get Epsteined. Like it's that tight.
GM's got that tight of a hold on it.
Yeah, they won't. I searched for probably a year and a half.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people, and not even a hint of being able to get one.
No whistleblowers whatsoever out there. No Snowden. No one that's going to run off to Russia after he leaks them.
But they treat it like you'd have to do that.
Yeah.
You know? But why? Why not let us know how the ECU works?
What's going to hurt them? Because everybody's got a good algorithm. If anything... Yeah, I mean, everybody's got an algorithm.
Yeah, let's go with that one.
Everybody's got something they're figuring out. But they could just hire the person that wrote it, and if they needed to, they could always just snipe them. Like, you know what I mean? They could always just, not snipe them like that. I mean, like, you know, like headhunt them, like get them from.
Right. Well, it's not like they couldn't track down where it went either. Anyways, like I said, I think on the German side, they've got to be allowing some of it. You know, maybe not directly allowing it, but
I think they
too much of it's out.
Low key allowing it to kind of make it into the market.
Bring it up to more. But if you compare where they're at versus where we're at, it's very upsetting.
Well, like the Supras and the BMWs are going sevens pretty well, you know? But where are the C7s going? Where are the C8s going sevens? Where are they at?
And that's with the ZF Trans.
Yeah.
So
where are they all at?
But the whole thing, a big thing with GM is the widebands, right? Mm-hmm. Older GMs, like let's say a 4-cylinder or a 6-cylinder, back in early 2000s had widebands factory. Almost always have had widebands factory. No performance models have them. Yeah. The Coyote has them. The Hellcat has them. Why don't we have it?
Well, even like, okay, GM.
Now the C8 has it, so I'll give it that. Mm-hmm. But
like you can ask GM a question like, hey, why did your Tahoe get flex fuel, but then everything else that was high performance not? Why? Why?
I got one better.
Do this?
Why the 2014 Silverado has a flex sensor factory, the little one that we all use. Mm-hmm. Factory. There's a bracket. There's a connector. Everything.
Like
it's
a Continental sensor.
Yep. 100%. It's all plumbed in. It's right there by the tank. Look under the door. 2015, the connector's there. No sensor. The bracket to hold the sensor is there. No sensor. No line to be able to use it. They went to the virtual system. Is that sensor that expensive?
Yeah.
I mean, we pay, what, $50 for it?
You couldn't just put a sensor in there?
I mean, they probably paid $1 for it.
Yeah.
But it's the weird things they do just don't make sense. It's almost like there's an internal fight there. But it's not benefiting the company, really. I mean, what have they come out with that you've been like, other than the C7 ZR1 lately? Which most people didn't even understand why that thing was so cool because it was so expensive you couldn't even touch one.
Well, then it disappeared as fast as it appeared.
Even worse than that, I don't know, GM's deal on parts, keeping parts, right? I think it was like 20 years or 25 years. For every model, they would keep parts available.
They would keep them in stock, yeah.
They've already discontinued the C7 ZR1. Blowers, anything C7 ZR1 you cannot get.
Yeah.
So a lot of my guys that have them, because I do quite a bit of them, they don't want to port the blowers. They don't want to do anything because it's a potentially $300,000 car in the next few years.
Yeah.
So they're scared if something hurts on the blower, you can't replace it now.
Huh.
But so how are they able to get away with that? They claim, I guess the claim was because it was a 1-year car. Mm-hmm. I'm like, you did
You
that.
think they would have a warehouse of enough of them
You
where
would
they
think.
could support them for quite a bit.
But they stopped
And
production
even
on
if
everything.
it's like you have to prove you own the car to buy one.
You do. You can't buy anything without the VIN.
Yeah, and I get that. Like, I get keeping it safe like that, you know?
Yeah.
But you should still have some of the stuff, maybe. You should have cast at least, like, you were casting the blowers. Cast a few extra.
Yeah. Well, now they cast them and they pull the injection out of it.
Yeah.
So.
Man, yeah, I mean, I haven't been excited by many cars lately
That's what I'm saying. It's like
on the domestic
when
side
they
of
started
things.
coming out with the what was it, the CT6 Blackwing V or something. It was supposed to be a twin turbo Blackwing V8 special motor.
Yeah.
All wheel drive, all wheel steer. I mean, when I saw that ad, I'll be honest, I had to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
I was
that's pretty
like,
cool.
because I'm a Cadillac guy, I'm like, this is insane.
Yep.
Did it ever come? I think they might have made a couple, and that was it. Why wasn't that a bigger deal? Why didn't more people go for that? And I think they did the pre-order, and then they stopped allowing the pre-order, and they just stopped producing the motor altogether. Like, but why? Was it a crap motor? Maybe, I don't know, but I mean.
But then even, you know, Ford, there's so much popularity on these two-door short bed Coyote trucks.
Oh, the Ford stuff.
And what does Chevy do? We're not making that. You can order one with a V8 and a short bed and two doors.
Yeah.
Why? Why Chevy?
So you can't get one at all?
You can't order one. You can't just order one of those trucks.
The one Cletus did.
It was custom frame from Mexico. You have to buy the frame. You have to buy the frame from Mexico or whatever it is, whatever.
Because in Mexico they have them.
Yeah.
That is wild. But that's what I'm saying. Those
Why can't you order
F-150s
that?
Those F-150s are on another level.
Yeah.
I
But
mean-
Chevy could at least be like, hey, they got
Let's
a big
try to
market
compete.
share. Let's at least, why can't you sell that? Why can't you make that truck? There's no reason why, if you have all the parts.
Well, wasn't that kind of an issue back? I mean, that was a really rare option back in the day, but I mean, it was very sought after.
Yeah.
So, but you could only get it, I think, in like a work truck. Mm-hmm. And it would have a 4.8 or something like that in it. But it was super rare.
But it was a V8 at least.
Yeah, but at
you
least
can
they gave
order a two-door short bed Silverado, but it's got the 2.7 in it, whatever that little.
I don't even know what that is.
It's like a Ecotech or whatever, something
I
stupid
don't
like
speak
that.
lame.
Yeah, but so they make it. They make the truck. They
Could
just
you
don't
swap-
put the engine
I guess
in.
you'd have to swap the engine. God knows
You
what
got
that would
to
cost.
swap
Yeah.
the frame.
So weird.
You got to shorten the frame and swap it. Yeah,
The guy that got that is really lucky. Yeah.
that one, and then Justin Keith has one now too, twin turbo one. But it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. I mean, because Ford knows what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're like, man, that thing's pretty hot. Let's give you one with a supercharger and a warranty. I'm like, wait, what? All right, GM, what do you got? I don't know if you saw the ad. They had an ad for a truck. I forget what the blower was, but I think it's supposed to be like 700 horsepower. Crazy Baja suspension on it.
Yeah.
110, 120,000. I'm like, bro, you missed that one.
Yeah.
Like that is not.
They
we don't want
overshot
that.
it.
We want that thing like it comes. Make it basic. You ain't even got to put fancy interior in it because they're gonna rip it out anyways. But yeah, why would you not make a similar truck? Why would you not want to compete with them? I mean, they make a good looking truck. I think when those trucks were side by side, I was like, man, I don't really know which one I do like
I
better.
know. I like the Chevy and the GMC, whatever. They look good.
But there's that internal struggle that somebody just doesn't want it to happen. It has to be.
Yeah.
And it's on the car stuff. But it as an enthusiast for GM, you got to feel let down.
It's hard to wave their flag. They make
Yeah.
it hard to be like a GM guy waving the flag and you got all their cars across the board. Like, it makes it hard.
Well, and then you get all the Coyote guys that are like, we don't have to do cam. We don't have to do anything. I'm like, well, to be fair, your cams are, you kind of just tune that one in there.
Yeah. You got 4 variable.
I like that GM stuck with the 2-valve deal for a while, but they give us the option and then they make it flat plane, which means, and then they put it in a car with a transmission that doesn't work. But one, we can't access it, and 2, you can't really put boost to it, which we're going to want to, because how many boosted flat planes live very long?
Yeah.
Usually not very long. So they're talking about doing the ZR1, the new ZR1, and it sounds turbo, but it also sounds flat plane. So I'm like, are you already giving us something that's going to be a letdown?
Have you seen, the GT350 flat plane deal?
Yeah.
What they had to do to even somewhat tame the harmonics on that thing? There was weights everywhere on the motor. Large amounts of weight put in different places because the harmonics of it are crazy once you have a flat plane. And I worry that GM's going to be in a similar deal where taming harmonics will kill any engine.
Yep.
And when flat plane, they hum a little different. And that's why the GT350 guys, they were having problems with spinning the oil filter off and catching on fire.
Oh, okay. So that's what that was then.
What would cause that?
Jesus.
A rattling engine.
I mean, Ferrari and them have obviously perfected the flat plane, but they don't try to boost it, and they don't have a clientele that's really as psychotic as we are.
Very small pistons, too.
Yeah, so there's a lot less rotational mass,
yeah.
and they use a lot lighter materials, and everything's a lot more stable. So
Probably helps.
Yeah, just a lot.
I don't know the science behind it. I'd assume that, moving a piston this big versus moving a Coyote piston is a lot different.
Yeah.
Even though it's a bunch of them. But
it just leads to it leads me to favor the Euro market, which everything in my body hates that. I mean, honestly, I hate it. But I messed with my first M3 doing tuning on it in Puerto Rico a few weeks ago, maybe about a month ago now. And I hated myself for how much I love that car. I mean, all-wheel drive. The all-wheel drive system is phenomenal. Turbo, you got, as soon as you start tuning it, you got switchable maps on the steering wheel, rolling anti-lag, factory computer, and to see how much adjustment there is. I mean, 6,100 tables. It's daunting, but once you start really messing with it, it's wild what you can do with those with a factory computer. It's almost like a factory Motec.
Yeah, and you have control over every button.
Everything. You can adjust the displays in the car. You can adjust what the display, if it says this much horsepower, you can adjust the horsepower meter. You can adjust how it calculates the horsepower if you want it to look cooler or something. We don't have nothing like that.
No, you can't click a button on any GM car that I know of and it's going to start rolling anti-lag.
Nothing. Well, and even if we didn't get that, maybe have some kind of integration that we can do different maps or something like that, or I don't know, put a wideband in it. Yeah. That kills it. That's common. Everybody knows that would help. That's what made the Coyote market so big, like London them. And I'm not saying that they do this. I'm saying that basically they've only got to get so close.
Yeah, there's a lot more cushion.
Yeah, so they can send out these remote files, and where I'm sitting here working on a car for hours to get it perfect, and that's if nothing else goes wrong, because God knows it's not going to fix itself if it does go wrong. Or the Coyote, it's got so much control and so much adaptation that it can fix the issue faster than it can hurt something.
So sad.
Hellcat, same thing. I mean, they have terrible flex fuel, so win-win. But
Coyotes didn't come with flex fuel either.
No, but the way their flex fuel works is terrible because it's inferred. So it's just this fuel trim error is this far off.
Yeah.
Which is what GM Virtual is.
It's using the wideband as the flex fuel.
To let it know that, hey, it's about 30% off. Yeah. It must be E85.
And you can do that with a Holly.
Yes.
You can use the wideband as a flex fuel, but it's an aftermarket ECU.
But it wouldn't really matter on GM. I love that we have the cool flex fuel. It works great. But if we had widebands, we wouldn't even need that.
Yeah.
I just don't know why they don't care, why they don't do it.
Yeah, there's such a disconnect from the customer. It doesn't make any sense. I was there when they announced. I was there for the launch of the 6th gen ZL1 1LE when they launched that at Daytona, and me and Garrett were there. We're talking to all the engineers and all these guys and all these higher ups, and we're showing them YouTube at the time, and they're like, they don't know what's going on. It's me and Garrett, and it's just a bunch of everybody else is like a journalist for some magazine, and we're posting hours before them, and they're in all looking at all this data, and I'm talking to I got to talk to the engineer behind the ATSV, and He's like, oh, like, what do you guys think of the car? You know, like, you're younger. I was like, I'm detrimental.
What do you think of the ATSV or the ZL1?
The ATSV. The ZL1 1LE is awesome.
I was going to say,
that's an awesome
that car is a track
I was like,
monster.
you nailed it. Like, it looks awesome. They showed it in white with all the black trim. I was like, you showed it right. Like, it showed it at Daytona.
Yeah, that's
I was
an
like,
animal.
Everything was right on that car. Then he's talking to me about the ATSV. I'm like, I'm honest to a detriment because I immediately tell him, I'm like, it's cool, but it really sounds like shit. And he's like, yeah, I lost the argument on that one, actually. Like, he was just like kind of hands in, kind of like one of those, like, yep, you nailed it. Like, that's what, that was his opinion as well. And I think it's a lot of the firing order on it for those.
It's definitely that, and just the way everything kind of fit in that chassis. It's the same chassis as the V3 and the ZL1 because it all bolts in.
Yeah.
But then you put that motor in there, and everything's so smashed that I think the exhaust was an afterthought. I think the way they routed everything was also an afterthought.
And it's a nice car. Like, I do enjoy them. I think that they can make some cool-ish turbo noises-ish. They're kind of fun to drive, but then they just fell short.
Well, they get to an extent. I think the other thing that really hurt that car was, I mean, because it's a titanium rod motor, like it was cool. But once you get to like 650, I think the aftermarket struggled. So getting the right fueling for the car, port injection stuff. I don't know if they even have that yet, or it just seems like the aftermarket kind of fell off for it too. And then the community killed the rest of it.
Yeah.
Like any hope that I had for it or desire to get port injection to work for it was gone with the community.
I also personally dislike meth injection kits. I don't enjoy that, especially on like these guys that have like a car that they want to drive like every day, like a normal ass street car or something. I dislike the idea of like you have to put something on there that's required, that's like kind of a hokey. Not like anything against the guys that make the kits, but it's not OEM. It's not like this like nice fit and finish thing. You got like either put a tank in the back and you have to fill up meth in there, or you put your freaking windshield wipers
in the C7. So Julio from Alky Control, I was talking to him because I noticed on the C7s when the meth would come on, because unfortunately they put a 4.2 liter rated blower on a 6.2. Yeah. I get why they did it, but it makes meth a necessary evil on that car.
Yep.
Unless you can go to E85, which is you run into your next issue. But not to go off on that, I was talking to him. I'm like, man, I noticed when the meth comes on, for like the first one or two times, it's got a big delay, like pretty big. And he's like, well, you're in Texas, it's a little hot. He said, we put protection against the tank to the fender towards the engine side. And he said, but did you know that meth boils at 140 degrees? I'm like, I didn't. I said, but I do have a thermal camera. So I grabbed that, and I had a C7 outside. I had the tank in there. Hadn't run all day. And it was about in the 90s outside. It was 157 degrees in that fender when it was only 90-something degrees outside.
Yeah.
So the meth's boiling in that tank the whole time.
Yeah.
So I started saying, what do we need to do? And he makes a tank for the back and all that. But so that there's a lot of issues like that people don't look at. Or they'll do 3 nozzles. And if you actually check the pressure, you get like 40 PSI with the 3 nozzles because it can't keep up. But people will put that on somebody's car and nobody checks it. That's where my issue is with meth. People that use, T-taps or, they don't look at things like that. Hey, you're in a hot environment. You probably shouldn't put it in that tank. Things like that. Outside of that, because of the design of the vehicle, until you can put good fuel in it, I mean, if you ever log a stock C7, I mean, it is knocking like crazy. It lives off of knock. So,
and I get the meth as a necessary evil. It frustrates me to have to use something like that on a car that's like truly just a street car because it's like it just feels so like
it's dirty.
Yeah, it just feels like you're relying on some other outside thing and like pumps and things that could go bad, and it's just like meth is pretty corrosive, and I've just always been frustrated by that necessary situation. I've always steered away from that.
Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know the better way to mitigate it is the big issue.
Yeah. I mean, everybody, like any high horsepower CTSV you see, C7Z, like it's probably got a meth kit on it.
Yeah. Well, when I went to 2650, so this is another crazy thing with that cam deal. So with you watch the intake temps on these cars, you kind of got an idea. On the C7, the intake temps go pretty high, pretty fast.
Mm-hmm.
So a 2650 car is a lot better because the bricks are massive.
Yeah.
But on a pull, on the average car with the big cam and all, I would see 25, 30-degree gains on a pull, which isn't terrible. On my car with the stage 1 cam, and I was explained by Rick that it's an efficiency deal and a lack of reverb through the intake side, my temps go down on a pull. Never seen that on a PD blower car, and that car makes 20 pounds of boost, 21 pounds of boost.
Yeah, I'm sure it's something with the overlap and not putting heat upwards, pulling.
Yeah, well, you ever pull the lid off of the blower and it's got a bunch of oil in there? And I was like, oh, that's a bad catch can. And Rick's like, no, that's reverberation because there's too much intake duration.
Yeah.
I'm not a cam guy, but I just did the testing, and that's what I saw. And I pulled the lid off my blower, and it's like it was brand new.
Well, even on the C7s, being a small blower and having to spin it so hard, and then also having very small cooling bricks, it was just a bad mix.
But if you leave the stock cam in there, you can get away with the lack of meth, I guess, if you have everything that flows. So if you Bluetooth cats, things like that, and you get that side kind of opened up, even though it flows well, people are like, oh, it doesn't gain a bunch of power. It doesn't, but it flows enough that the intake temps will be affected by it. So there's ways, I think, to get around the meth, but nobody's going to do it.
I like the cats on my CTSV.
Yeah.
A lot of people are anti-cat, but, you don't smell any fuel. You don't smell, it's kind of nice. You
could adjust the injection window and not smell it either.
Yeah, interesting.
But I had an issue before I even started tuning cars. This is back 2010, 2011. There's a ProCharge Camaro. This is when the high flow cats came out. So, but if you notice how the high flow cats are put in the exhaust, they're a cylinder, and then it tapers, and then it goes to the exhaust, right? So this car comes to me, and it was supposedly a buddy of mine. And he's like, man, every time I get on my car, it falls on its face. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not really sure what it is. Drop it off. I'll check it out. And I had an HP tuner. I had a Pro cable. Just wasn't a Pro. So I'm logging the car for him, and I can't really tell because I really didn't know enough about it. He wanted some cutouts put on it as well at the same time. So we go to put the cutouts in it, and they cut the exhaust. And you could see the cat, I guess it had failed from the Pro Charger, and it starts pushing it into that taper down spot. Well, they're stainless. So all it does is it gets harder. And it would push into there and it would plug up. So long story short, they put the cutouts on it. They got rid of the cats. And I go to pull the car on the side road and roll into it a little bit. And the motor just takes a shit. Because it had been plugged the whole time.
Yeah.
And then I ended up getting sued for that.
Oh, nice.
And my insurance was like, yeah, pay him out. I'm like, bro, I didn't do anything to the car. I didn't have anything to do with that. So that kind of put a bad taste in my mouth. But even today, and Cooks, all these guys that are doing these cats, if they would fix that issue, we'd have no problem running them. But that's a problem today. If you see people that are running a blower or something and they have the green cats or those cats with the taper down, chances are, I'd say 90% of them are already collapsing into that pipe. And it starts plugging the exhaust off. And I don't care about the power aspect. I care about the backing up, the restriction.
Yeah.
And it's really bad on the motor.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that much back pressure. I mean, we monitor it on turbo cars.
Nobody checks it on a blower car.
Yeah, especially post-cat.
Right.
To check it that's a sensor really
There's
far
not even
back
something
there.
that nobody would even think about. But because I've seen it so many times, and I don't know why, but I never see it posted about. But I know other people see it. I don't know if they're posting about it and somebody's like, hey, shut up.
I'm not much of a cutout guy either. I've grown to not be.
I'm not either. I like exhaust.
Yeah.
I like my factory valves. Yeah. But if they could make an emissions product that didn't cause an engine to fail.
That would be nice.
Put something there, make it squared so it can't push into the taper. Mm-hmm. So until they do that, it makes us resistant to want to use it.
Yeah, or even, a couple bolts through it or something.
Anything to hold it, because it's not like, it's going to come apart.
Or if they just didn't have to make an emissions product, would be really nice,
That'd
too.
That'd be fantastic.
If, you could sell, I remember a few years ago, I think it was Stainless Works that had a, letter going around, like, we can't make headers anymore, or something that.
That was what, maybe a year and a half.
Yeah.
But, like, Cooks, all those guys, you can't buy headers without cats. Not that I've seen. You have to buy them.
And that's, like, probably, what, $1,000 add-on?
Oh, yeah.
For just the cats.
Yep.
So.
You can't buy a non-catted X pipe. Like, if you already had headers and you want to buy just the non-catted X pipe for off-road use, can't buy it.
Yeah, I know. A lot of people try to hide behind that off-road use, but it doesn't actually
didn't really work out.
No, you can't just be like, this is for off-road, and then, like, it suddenly is legal.
Yeah.
It doesn't... People have that misconception that you can just put off-road use on things and sell whatever you want.
You see a lot of people's videos and stuff, and they're just like, I'm like, why didn't you just, like, not talk about that? Just shh.
They're even trying to serialize cars per car. So, like, you bought a set of headers and cats for this car VIN number. You cannot buy another set of headers and cats because I don't know. I don't know why that makes sense, but it does. I'm not smart enough to be in government.
They VIN the factory cats. So whatever they do with that information, I don't know. But all the factory cats on cars, I don't remember how far back, a couple years ago, they all come with the actual VIN number on them.
Yeah.
So when you get rid of them or whatever, I guess maybe that's going to be an issue. But again, and nothing against HP tuners because, I mean, they've been great to me. I've made a great living with them. I am grateful for their product. But the RTDs. So I got into their program, their reseller program, right? Because obviously, why wouldn't I?
Yeah.
I noticed when I ordered the 20 RTDs that they're on my list of devices. And I'm like, well, that's kind of strange, right? So I have a buddy who's a lawyer, and he likes to read those long documents. So I had the reseller agreement. So I sent it to him. I said, hey, man, read through this. See if there's something weird in there. And there is. So basically, and this is just what he told me, so I'm not going to know it word for word. We're liable for every RTD that we sell. And if asked, or I think it was as requested, we are to give them whoever bought that RTD and what vehicle it went to. Why? Why would I have to do that?
When you say RTD, what exactly do you mean by that?
Remote tuning device.
Yeah.
So it's like an MPVI, but they can't access the editor.
So any tuning device from HP tuners, whether it's their...
But it's linked to us, so it's private label. So it would be an RTD with my name, my company logo on it, and I would have to sell it to you. So I'm linked to that.
It's similar to what happened to PFI Speed. Brent, I mean, he got hit for selling somebody else's ECUs, and they didn't get hit.
Yeah,
How does that work? He didn't make them.
That was the most unfair thing I've ever seen.
He's just the middleman.
I'll be honest. That was my first story that I read that really, really gave me chills.
It's got to rattle your boots a little bit.
Because I'm like, dude, this is insane. I mean, with all the stuff that's going on in the world, all the private jets up there that are just hanging out, you come after us? What, and most of us are on E85. That's what Lund's argument was. He's like, most of us are on E85, which means our emissions are less than your emissions in your regular everyday car.
Yeah.
So
there's really no reasoning with it, I've learned. That's the unfortunate thing. Like, we're logical people, so you think like you can just like explain this to somebody, but there's just no
You would think maybe it's a money grab, right? But like, what's the money grab? We got to get a bunch of money from a bunch of us broke tuners.
Yeah, like
we are by far not where the money's at. So, what is their benefit to come after us? I don't know, and I know y'all have been dealing with a lot of stuff with like the track, right? But
that's more of a county thing.
But it all rolls together.
Yeah,
like they're shutting down the racetracks and stuff like that. It's got to be part of.
But some tracks have dealt with somebody come out with like a soil sample thing and like that's a different situation.
Yeah,
Somebody
imagine
with a soil sample
back in the 60s and 70s how
Yeah.
But nowadays the tracks they're not pouring oil out there on the ground.
No, of course not.
But that soil sample goes back.
What are you gonna soil sample fresh asphalt? What's that gonna look like? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, that's a good point.
Like what's gonna be in there? I'm sure it's petroleum based. Everything is.
Yeah.
It's like
Jesus.
what? I don't even understand this. It's just like it's rules that don't even make any sense. They're just throwing things out there. I mean, I get it. Like, I think if there wasn't any rules, the whole argument is we'd still be using leaded gasoline. I don't believe that. I think leaded gasoline would have went away because there's better alternatives.
And yeah.
I don't think we would have just been still using carbureted small blocks if there was never anything to push us into like the next generation.
But right.
Some people still are. Good for them.
Yeah.
But I don't think that regulation is what pushes innovation in this space. I think car guys left to our own devices would have cars that are hyper efficient because
that's where you make power.
I want that too, though. Like I would love my daily driver to get 80 miles to the gallon, be some like shitbox, 2-cylinder, whatever it has to be. But then I want a performance car that is also as hyper efficient.
But
we would go both ways.
But where logic obviously goes out of the window is the whole electric car argument, which I don't know enough on the subject to be an expert on it, but lithium's pretty terrible. Cobalt's pretty terrible. It never goes away. The waste is never depleted.
Yeah.
How is that going to help? And it's blacking out cities like crazy. It's California. And they had a meeting in Congress with this company that was ordering X amount of work trucks. And they asked them, they were like, hey, well, how much power consumption would it take? I don't know if you saw that one.
Yeah.
How much power consumption would it take? And they're like, well, we calculated it to be this. And he's like, that's more than several small cities. Mm-hmm. Because you would need that just for your vehicles. Yeah, that would just be for my work fleet. What logic does that make?
Yeah, it's not possible.
And
I'm all for choice. Live it up. If you want an electric vehicle, live it up. There's going to be downsides.
We rented the Plaid and it was fun.
There's going to be downsides. There's downsides to every vehicle.
But it's not. But they treat it like in their logical minds, it's green, and it's just not. We can't keep up with that. It's all charged by fossil fuel anyways.
Yeah, I've actually kind of come to the realization that it actually just takes local emissions that would be put out from cars and puts the emissions in poor areas where they put the factories. Where they put the factories and they put the power plants.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like you're just relocating the emissions.
It's a terrible way to look at it, but it is so true.
And it's not from the wealthy areas that those power plants are. You don't see a coal plant in a wealthy neighborhood.
Yeah.
It's just relocated emissions. It's crazy. And that's the saddest way to think about it, but it's...
I didn't even think about it that way. That makes it so much worse. But my biggest thing was like the grid structure, though. But even so in Puerto Rico, regardless if people think it's a third world country, they're just crazy. They've obviously never been there. I really like it there. But
yeah, and you've been there, what, almost a year now?
Yeah, and I've been going for 5 years.
So you've lived in Puerto Rico for almost a year now.
I've lived there, about 6 months.
Okay.
So we've been there for 6 months now. But, they do have random blackouts. That's a thing. We knew about that getting into it. But... So there's a thing, excise tax. So say we sent our Mustang, the 2012 Mustang V6 base model deal, So the excise tax on that car was $1,700. That's just like to get it on the island because it's a vehicle. And I think the reason behind it, on newer cars, it's like 40%.
Oh, really?
And I think the reason behind it is basically to limit the cars on the island.
Yeah.
But if you have an electric vehicle, there's no excise tax. The electrical grid already sucks.
Yeah.
Why would you add all this? Why would you promote that? Because out there, they are more logical. And I hate to say that because I love the States. I love the U.S. I'm very patriotic to that. But the more I live there, the more I hate it here.
It's less corrupt.
No, it's way more corrupt. Yeah. The government there is definitely more corrupt, but it's the people.
It's a small population too, so it's a little bit easier to pinpoint where issues come from, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
You know, any smaller. I've had this discussion with other people where they're like, New Zealand, you know, we're so good. I'm like, you have 5 million
I was
people.
about to say, yeah, that's not very
It's
much
smaller
more.
than Houston. Like, it's like, of course it's easier to manage.
But I guess I can't get over, like, they already know there's a power issue. Why would you promote the electric cars there? I don't really get. And then California, their biggest thing, and their grid is terrible. They have blackouts worse than Puerto Rico.
And my whole thing always is like, Toyota perfected a hybrid on their first swing. And it's been perfect this whole time. Like, you still see first generation Priuses still kicking.
And now they look good.
Yeah.
I know, that would hurt to see.
But, like, you still see all the Priuses that have ever been made still kicking. And those people that bought them have more than paid for themselves because they've lived forever.
Well, it makes sense. You know, this whole, the whole range anxiety thing. You add the small motor and you don't have that issue. Yeah. But I had that. I had to get to the airport this morning and it was in a Plaid. So, you know, the battery goes fast when you want to get somewhere. Yeah. Yes, the car gets there fast, but now I'm like, okay, I got to be here. I can be there. I had to be there for 10 a.m., right? So I'm looking at my GPS. It says I'm going to be there at 9:47, I think it was. What I didn't account for was the 30 minutes I had to charge it before I could drop it off. You know, and then this morning leaving, there was 11% battery. I was at 1% getting to the charger. I was sweating. So I'm like, what if it, you know, what if I don't make
you're stuck.
it?
You're like, here.
But if we had a small engine, like a hybrid, we wouldn't have that issue. How much emissions could that little motor really be putting out?
And they've never even really done diesel hybrids. Like, they've never even ventured much into that because
that guy with the
so squashed.
What's that, Warped Perception channel? Have you seen that?
I think I know what you're talking about.
He does all the rocket motor stuff.
Yeah,
he's got a Tesla, and he did like a little gas motor in the back.
Yeah.
But now he did a diesel motor, and it does significantly better. He just did a 3,500-mile trip with it.
It's great.
I mean, I thought that was crazy. But he's literally showing you that with this little motor that you could tuck anywhere in the diesel form, as you were saying, because nobody really thinks of that one. Why wouldn't that be the better option?
Like, do you know how a train operates? It has a diesel engine that sits at a certain RPM, and then it powers electric motors. Like and it works perfectly. We don't think about it.
There's a guy on I think it's TikTok making this Edison trucks. Yeah, he's up in Canada, I believe. That's genius. They make crazy power. They're hauling these logs up, you know, crazy hills, crazy steep hills. So they're using the electric motors, and in the front they just have a diesel generator, or I don't know if they're using the big motors, but so I mean, it's obviously working. People are doing it, but the government's not wanting to do it. I don't get that. Why would you want to do full electric if you didn't have to? If you didn't have to have that anxiety?
The batteries are the tough part. Like, if you can avoid more batteries, that seems like the smart move, because I will say the electric engines are there. The little motors, like those things work. And those have worked forever. Those have been around for 200 years. Yeah. Every drill, everything, like the engines work, the motors, whatever you want to call them, they work. It's just the power containment that can do it.
That and the range. And if you did the little motor, the battery pack would be much, much smaller. The vehicles would be lighter. Yeah. So I got rid of the Plaid, and because somebody else had rented it, and I got a Model 3. So I'm like, you know, I started driving, and I'm like, man, this thing is significantly better handling wise. It felt much lighter. It still has really good acceleration. Yeah. It has a 300-something mile range. But I'm thinking, you know, if you had your little generator there, it wouldn't weigh as much. I think the difference was the extra motor in the battery pack. So if you could drop all that down and make it a simple car with a little motor in the back to power it, you would ultimately be significantly better because you'd have less issues with the battery and the waste. You'd have lighter weight, so the car would be significantly more efficient, longer range. All around, I don't know where the negative is.
Yeah, it just makes sense. I mean, and even the EPA, they make weird things happen. So like the fine that they gave Volkswagen for the Dieselgate stuff has basically ruined Volkswagen. They had to sell off their stake in Porsche. Like they had to really change some things.
Where does that money go?
Yeah. Doesn't go to us. And then even Dodge was able to make the Hellcat because they were buying credits from Tesla. The credits, you can put out this much emissions for your whole fleet. They had to buy credits from Tesla. So it's like, what are we even doing here?
Yeah, I was gonna say, why would that even be allowed?
Just let people make cars.
It's like back in the day, Dodge, the PT Cruiser. The PT Cruiser is technically a truck.
One of the best cars of all time.
Yeah. But anyways, it's classified as a truck.
Yeah.
And the reason was for emissions. I'm like, if y'all can play all these games, is the real goal to fix pollution? I really don't think so.
Did the PT Cruiser trick GM into making the HHR?
Oh yeah.
Were they like, oh, look at that? Like,
I think
they copied the homework of the PT Cruiser. Out of all the cars to copy at the time, they were like, Chrysler's onto something.
It's those two guys.
Yeah.
But somebody looked at that PT Cruiser and was like, that's hot. And
those are selling.
Yeah. They did sell though. They did pretty well.
The Woody version of it.
The HHR didn't do good at all, but it also came with no windows, and that gave a little vibes.
It was odd.
Yeah. So I was like, man, that's a strange way to handle that one. But yeah, they had to have looked at that and been like, that's hot. Mm-hmm. But it was that guy that hates performance. I don't know. Well, I don't know. Then they turboed
did the Cobalt one. They did the Cobalt engine, but then the PT Cruiser also had an SRT4 version where it was, it was basically a neon.
Yeah.
SRT4 in a PT Cruiser, and then I don't know why those two things were like somehow
linked.
They battled it out in this weird underground battle of like.
Oh, the hot hatches.
Yeah. Did they think they were going to compete with Europe on that one?
Well, remember they tried putting like the M3 back in the day on it, and I remember an article of like the hot hatches versus the M3, or I think it was the M3, and they got kind of got their butt kicked. Like in the straight line, they did really well.
Yeah.
But like every turn, it was an atrocious car.
Yeah.
So, but I'd be lying if I didn't say I thought the Cobalt was a cool idea. But they supercharged it.
It was interesting.
And then they turboed it, I think.
Yeah, I think they had both.
So was it the supercharger was bad on emissions, so they did a turbo?
Maybe it was just not good
at all.
At all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what superchargers they used. Did they use like the 113 or whatever some people use?
I don't know. That was definitely not something I looked into.
No, yeah. And then there was so many LSA blowers in the world because of the GM recall. Like GM was the laziest recall of all time.
Yeah.
Like all it needed was a stupid isolator.
Piece of plastic.
And any GM tech could have done it quicker than taking the blower off, probably. And that was
that was the weirdest thing to me ever. That was the weirdest thing I've ever seen.
So for people that don't know, they were basically giving away LSA blower bottom ends. You had to get the lid, but you could buy one from GM for like $500.
Yep.
And then you had a blower.
And then all you had to do was just change the little isolator in there to a solid one. Or you could do another factory one. I wouldn't have, but I remember that, and I was like, yeah, we're gonna put that on everything.
It's like a $30 piece.
And that blower, that was another thing that I had kind of listened to Rick over the years with. Apparently, the twist ratio of the screws that are in that blower make that blower one of the most efficient blowers there are. When he brought his 1.9 to compete with a 2650, his blower made more power in a 1.9. I don't know how, but there's something in there. So in that development and that whole setup, that blower was it. I think that was the peak of GM for quite a while.
Yeah.
So
it's cool to see all these third-party aftermarket companies now casting their own blowers. And, they're all kind of using the same rotor pack.
It's Eaton, and they're tried and true.
Mm-hmm. But then they're all doing their own casting and their own kind of twist on it. But there's a good amount right now. Like, the market's pretty
It was
heavy.
weird how fast that happened. Because before it was like everybody had a blower for the car. Mm-hmm. But there was never, I don't remember there being multiple 2300 options.
Yeah.
So
there's like 4 blowers I can think of right now that are all those 2650s that all have their own unique casting of them. And it's a pretty cool time to be.
It is kind of weird how these Hellcat blowers are getting really massive. I think they're like a 3.8 liter or something now.
The Whipples have like a 4.1.
Jesus.
Like they got a big ass Whipple too.
That's crazy.
And they're going on an engine that's only a 5 liter.
Yeah. Yeah. that was something impressive. Aiden he does TikTok, and he's got a Whipple Mustang. So just a regular 5.0, they have their little flash deal. But, and this goes back to how good the operating system is. That thing's made 900 horsepower.
On just their calibration.
On just their calibration and just changing pulleys a little at a time. And somehow it not letting go. It still hasn't let go.
You can't even imagine that on the GM side of things.
That's what I'm saying. Could you imagine
even flashing your own car on the GM side of
well,
things?
Well, it's a non-tunable car.
Yeah.
So the trans isn't tunable, the engine isn't tunable, anything. And he bolted the blower on in his driveway, right? Flashes this whatever. I don't know what they're flashing, but they're flashing something. But there was no revisions after that I know of. They took it to Palm Beach Dyno and just kept going. Started changing, putting a little bit of better fuel, some race gas or something in there, throwing a little bit of ethanol in it because you can, because it has wide bands. Some people disagree with that, but it has wide bands, so it doesn't matter. And the knock sensor algorithm on a Ford is really good. They live on knock, but they live on it in a sense that it will give you the most amount of power possible as long as it doesn't see the knock. So as soon as you add that fuel, it's adjusting. It's bringing your timing up.
Yeah, so they're kind of riding that knock sensor pretty hard.
And they're beating that car like crazy. I think the car runs low fives, like 5.0, 60 to 130, which I know you don't know what that is, but that's when you look that up, that's fast. That's really fast.
I'm sure a lot of people listening know.
Yeah, they're gonna know that's
gets lost on me, but
this is a stock car. I think there's a booster pump on it as well. I'm not 100%. But I mean, this is a stock fuel system with a booster pump and a bolt-on Whipple.
Yeah, and booster pump just to give a little bit more ass to the pump. Not
and
really anything.
I've never been a big fan of Whipple only because they gave us a 2.9 for the LT platform, and they deserve to be kicked in the butt for that because that thing eats itself. I've never seen one that doesn't.
Yeah.
But, it seems on the Ford side, that's crazy.
Yeah, the 2.9 wasn't that good of a rotor pack.
It was nothing. It's just a heat pump that might make 900 on a really cold day. And somebody's like out there like, I made 1,000. Yeah, you didn't.
Yeah.
And it breeds metal shavings. I mean, I've seen them in motors. People are like, oh, I got a 2.9. I'm like, pull the lid. Well, let's just start tuning it. Nope, pull the lid. And they pull the lid and it's all gray and it's all metal. I said, nope, change it, fix it, do something. I'm not being liable for that.
Huh. Do they still sell that?
I don't think so. I think they went to do the 3.0, but I don't really know many people that have a 3.0 for the GM.
Yeah.
I think they just put all their R&D into Ford because, they don't even have to deal with the tuning or anything because it works.
There's so many of them too. There's so many Mustangs and trucks. It's just, it makes more sense. I mean, every business has to kind of do that. And that's part of the GM talk is like, they've made their own bet on this by making it so difficult and by being so all over the place on everything and like sometimes port injections, sometimes not. Like blower companies can't keep up with that.
Yeah.
Like how are they going to make something for that?
I think like the Edelbrock, they came out with, they have an option that you can put the port in it. But,
if your ECU doesn't control it and you don't have the wiring for it, it's like.
Yeah. Well, and luckily now we do. Too High PSI, that's a company I started working with. Funny enough, the guy that owns the company is Mike Sitar, and he was the president of Magnuson.
Oh, okay.
So it's a really cool deal, but he came out with that port injection, and it links to the CAN bus.
Really?
So you wire it into the CAN bus on the GM car. So I was like, man, this is to me, started nerding out. I'm like, this is really cool. And
That is awesome.
Mike's a nerd too. I don't know how he wants to take that, but so it's watching the MAF signal, and it's got a direct tap in for the MAF, and you set your table with an arbitrary number, but it relates to pulse width.
Yeah.
It takes the flex fuel feed off of the factory computer and will adjust to that. And I mean, it works pretty phenomenal. That's what I run on my car. I've had it since day one. So now with the CAN bus, we were like, hey, Mike, what about putting a wideband in it? And Mike, no problem. 2 weeks, wideband integration.
Really?
So we have a wideband now, which was, that's a game changer for GM guys. And especially since once you go to port injection, you're starting to make some pretty good power. So go a little further. I said, hey, you know, I'd like to spray my car, but I don't like spraying fuel through the blower because it's hot.
Yep.
I don't know that it's an issue, but it worries me. So I wanted to spray dry. So another week goes by. He said, hey, nitrous adder is added. I'm like, what's that? He's like, oh, when you ground a pin, use this wire. He said, when you activate it, ground this pin, it will add whatever pulse width you want at whatever RPM you want. And it is spot on.
So you're talking for like dry nitrous.
So typically when you spray dry nitrous or wet, right, you always get that lean hit first.
Yep.
I don't have that.
Yeah,
you can't even
ECU
see a ripple.
Is controlling.
If anything, I do
everything.
get a little rich dip, and that's because the injectors come in first. But I know I have fuel to all 8 cylinders.
That's very cool.
And then I have the dry coming in, which without the fuel, my intake temps go even further down.
Well, I mean, that's an aftermarket fixing pretty much all of the pain points.
So from there, I was like, let's push further. So we've got wideband, we've got everything integrated, we've got the nitrous adder, and he was like, man, you know, what'd be cool is boost by gear. And Mike in Mike fashion was like, bet.
Yeah.
So with the Magnuson, it only comes with a single port on the bypass, and you need a dual port for boost control, which for some reason I didn't even think was a thing. So Mike hits me up. It's been about, I think it took a little over a month or two. So not only is it boost by mile an hour in a configurable table, it's offset by gear because we have gear position as well.
Yep.
It's front and rear speed, so it's using the front speed primarily. Then you have it modified by gear, so you can do 95% of this table in first gear.
Very cool.
Also modified by ethanol content. So, you know, on pump gas, you can kind of hit a little more boost down low and then hold it to kind of keep your power curve pretty good. But only say I'm running 26 pounds of boost. You don't want to do that on pump gas. And my thought behind it was in Puerto Rico, I have a ZL1 that makes 26 pounds of boost. Well, there's not ethanol at the pump very often there. So they drive that car on 93 a lot. So without having to touch a tune, without having to do anything, they just put pump gas in the car and it drops the boost and runs a boost curve off of the ethanol.
Wow.
And it is
So you're
fast.
You're kind of making advanced tables.
I'm building a BMW algorithm into a Chevrolet. That's what we're doing.
It sounds like a Holly advanced table too.
And the reflex comes from the BMW market because they use it for port control first.
Interesting.
But yeah, so basically in my car, let's say on blower, it makes about 1150. In second gear on an 18-inch tire, I can flat foot it and just hold on. And it brings the boost in, no problem, no issues, everything's perfect. If anything happens, the wideband will catch it and fix it right away. I mean, if this guy can do that with that box, why couldn't they add that with GM?
I'm sure somebody lost an argument somewhere. That's how I like to imagine this. I like to imagine somebody went to bat, but you know, I fall back into like a nihilistic viewpoint where I'm like, it was probably just nobody cared.
I just feel like the widebands would have kept you safer. That's why I'd asked him about that in the first place. You know, and not only now we have all this, there's a new box apparently coming out. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that, but it has GPS in it. It has dual wideband now. It has more inputs and outputs. And I mean, this is just a company. I've been there. I've been to their building. I think his wife has like a linen it's a massive pattern decoration deal. And he started like in the back work area, bought a CNC and just started going with it.
Yeah.
And, I mean, filled a market niche. But, you know, in California, all his testing, he has to be very.
Yeah, you'll have that.
Yeah.
So, you know, obviously people are building these cars all over the country. And one thing that I always try to instill into people is don't buy anything for your car until you talk to the person tuning it. Because they know much better than you that you're just going to go on and order a pulley from here, injectors from there, decap them, something stupid like.
Oh, thank God that's not a thing anymore. And I know it worked. Don't come at me, bro. I run them myself. But I've also flown them myself and been like, man, that was super stupid of me.
That's the thing. As long as you cut it and then flow it, because I've seen that.
Right.
I've seen
you
people
can cut it,
decap
flow
them
a bunch of them, and match them together.
Exactly.
I totally didn't do that.
I've seen that done. I've seen Jeremy do that for one of his personal cars. He's like, I cut 16 and
But Jeremy's a smart guy, and he's going to check all that stuff.
It's his car.
Yeah.
He's not selling them.
Yeah. I was younger. I was like,
yeah,
good enough.
And I get it. But, if you're going to build a car, you should really talk to your tuner first. How much of that do you deal with?
Okay. So this is the funniest instance of that. And I try to tell people, I'm like, look, LS was its thing. LT, if you do it wrong, you're out. So on a C7 Z06 or a ZR1, either one, first mods people want to do is a pulley. Okay. Well, the factory fuel system was not set for that. So you can do a pulley and you can gain 40-50 wheel, right? With a 2-3 upper 40-50 wheel. Or you can do a set of spark plugs, because I'm weird about that. I want spark plugs in it. Mm-hmm. Spark plugs, flex fuel, and a tune, and pick up 100 to 120 wheel.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you do that? Because you can't do the pulley as well, because then you start losing low side. But I try to tell people that. They don't listen. So then the next thing is they'll call me and they've got an upper and lower pulley, no meth, no low side, and their tuner was like, the air fuel was good. The thing that I don't understand how it works, but it does, if you are wrong on your injection window, you can have the right air fuel still somehow. Somebody much smarter than me can explain that, but you can have, say you're targeting 12.5. It will still run 12.5, but it will puff black smoke out of the back of that thing like it's nobody's business. And you've probably seen the LT cars where the whole back bumper is black. Mm-hmm. That's detonation. People are like, oh, it's rich. No, it's not. That's it trying to pump during the compression stroke, and that's a misfire. And a lot of people don't get that. You'll still see it a little on 93 just because it's a not limited deal.
You can hear detonation. You can hear spark knock.
On the LT, you won't hear it because of the way it's doing it. Because it's the fuel detonating, it doesn't have that. It doesn't have that ting like you would hear. Plus, you're wide open and it's really loud.
Yeah. Well, on a dyno.
On the dyno, you ever see they're making the pull and then towards the top, it's like puff, 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 puff. Mm-hmm. That's detonation.
Yeah.
And people don't get that. That's where that 100-something, 200 horsepower is coming from.
Yeah, my CTSV was doing it on the dyno pretty bad, but it's got cats and it was hot.
Yeah, that.
But
on the LT, it's way worse because of the injection window. Mm-hmm. So they'll tell them, hey, the air fuel was good with upper and lower pulley with no low side on like E30 or something like that, and it's way out of the window. So then I got to tell them, hey, that's not going to work. And they're like, oh, well, it's been working. Okay, well, we can argue this, or you could just do the low side and do these few things, and we can make another 150, 200 horsepower.
Yeah.
The LT game is so much worse now because the big thing now is aftermarket parts. Back in the day, we had MAP pricing, so you couldn't sell things cheaper. Mm-hmm. And I think that's gone now or something. Because everybody they'll sell a part to make $30 just to out the shop that tried to have a business to hold the product for you. So there's so many of those guys that everybody wants to buy their stuff from somebody else, and they don't want to ask the tuner or ask anybody first.
Yeah, it's big in the CTSV world where it's like somebody just drop shipping stuff and they don't even it sucks to use somebody like that because they don't have any skin in the game.
Exactly.
They got none.
But they kill the market. They kill everything else. They kill the guys that want to package this stuff properly. So we're left to deal with it. And I mean, honestly, some of them, when they're just so far off, Titan, he had a cam, and I'm looking at the cam, and I'm like, I don't know how that even fit in the motor to begin with. And I'm like, this is not going to work. And he's like, well, they said it made, I think 800 or 900. Not even close. Not even close. And that's a package that somebody obviously puts out as a thing that they claim works 800-900 horsepower. It clearly doesn't. This is so common now. Once you tell them that there's an issue, they're just like, I don't believe it. I don't know. It was working before or something like that. So it's really kind of killing our spirit too.
Yeah, well, it's easier to fool somebody than it is to convince them they've been fooled. So you get some of that.
We try to build cars like a proof of concept. The whole reason I did my C7 was only to show, what can be done with I don't want to say no mods, light mods, but it's a rod and piston motor.
Yeah.
With a blower that's not ported or anything, bolt on, and it makes significant power, and it runs faster than, I mean, it's got to be in the top 5 to 10 C7s, 60 to 130 by
Yeah, you're making
margin.
a blueprint.
But so we do that. We did that in the CTSV world. When we did my wife's car, we posted everything. When that car went 850, this is how you go 850. And I think people didn't believe what we had, right? So I built another one and went 840, and I posted everything about it. And people still went with just different ways with their buddies, giant turbos they couldn't spool, things like that. But I don't, if by building 2 cars and showing you how it was done doesn't work, what works now?
Yeah.
But that's why you see a lot of people that, you know, we're real picky now. I don't, if somebody hits me up for tuning, I'm like, okay, what's the setup? And if it's something I'm even questionable about, send me a picture, send me a video. And if it looks like somebody threw it together in their backyard and it's wiring all over the place and it's a newer car, which is crazy that that's a thing now, I just rather not even get into it.
I don't blame you at all. I mean, I've seen builds come through, you know, when I was spending a lot of time with Jeremy up at the same shop, we shared a shop, I'd see builds come through and I'd be like, Jeremy, turn this guy away.
Yeah.
Like, why do you want to put your name on that, man? Like,
because he's too nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, and I get it. Like, you know, it's that guy's car. Like, it's what he's got. Like, I've talked to Brent at PFI Speed, and he's on like, he's told me, he's like, this is all they got. I want to help them.
Well,
I want to help them, and I respect that a lot. But like, sometimes when you have a business and you have a reputation and your time is valuable,
I'll spend a day or so. If somebody tells me, hey, this is what I've got, and I'm like, I don't want to deal with that, I'll tell them, hey, there's a lot that needs to be done. Are you willing to fix the setup first? So I'll always give them that option.
Yeah.
Because I'm not about the high dollar builds. You know, again, I started with a Stingray on purpose. I didn't start with a C7Z because I thought that was a little less practical. So a Stingray was the practical option. Rods and pistons, $1,800.
Yeah.
Now we have a Z06 motor. Same thing. So I'm all about the budget build, but it's the guys that I'll tell that to, and they're like, "Nah, this setup works." And I'm like, "Okay, good luck, figure that out." But I run into that more often than not. It's not really so much a budget thing for some reason. It's that they read this stuff on the internet and it's the gospel.
Yeah.
And it's so wildly wrong because they'll get these setups from guys that, again, track times don't matter to people for some reason. And I'm sure they do to people that really care. But, I mean, people follow these people that don't even go to the track. That don't even do draggy times, nothing, anything.
There's a lot of snake oil.
It's crazy.
Lots of it.
And people go for it. The injector game, biggest thing ever. Those 200 injectors.
The Bosch 220s.
You know how many stock cars, stock Vs I've had that had those in it? And I'm like, bro, what are you thinking? Like the amount of scaling you have to do to that tune. And people are like, oh, you just scale it. I'm like, you don't understand what that's doing.
Yeah.
You're scaling it so everything calculated in the background. Because remember, we're seeing, again, let's say 1,000 tables. We're seeing 1,000. Remember, the BMW stuff, not even defined, has 6,100. The GM stuff has that too. We just haven't defined it.
There's not unlocked.
It's there, and it's working. So a lot of that stuff in the background, you really alter when you scale the injectors. And then if you don't scale them right, when you're trying to scale a 200-pound-an-hour injector with a 127-pound limit ECU, you know, you're having to do some crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And then you're going to make a pull and your grams per cylinder is like 0.7 when you're in 14 pounds of boost. I'm like, you realize how that doesn't work, right?
Well, even my CTSV, I bought it like this. It has a pulley, flex fuel, and it has 1350cc injectors.
Now there's something there. So because of me wanting to be in R&D, I had an issue back in the day with the ID850s, okay? Phenomenal injector. But an ID850 is not an 850.
Yeah.
An ID850 is a 1000. I don't know what the calculation deal was there, or maybe he rated it because, you know, Tony is like elite. So he was like, this is this, right? So a lot of people were doing the decapped FICs because it's $400. You send your injectors in, they decap them, and they're thousands. They're not. Those were about 90 at best. So they would take the 850s out and put these $400 injectors that were less in there.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it was a big problem.
Yeah.
And I had made a couple posts about it, and I kind of ran it. I was like, this is stupid. You guys aren't even trying at this point. You're just grabbing whatever you see. You need to make these things run right. And then those decapped injectors, my fuel trims, I don't care how hard you tried, would not come in less than 20%. Positive or negative either way, could not dial them in. And it wasn't me. I had multiple other tuners mess with it, and you never see it any better. So on accident, I might have mentioned fuel injector development, which was a buddy of mine, but I was just like, you know, I had these injectors and I had the same issue, and they were the 1000s that he used to do. And so he reached out to me. He goes, "Hey, Dick, what is your deal?" I said, "Man, I just want a good injector that can be an upgrade to the 850 that I can put in a stock car." And he's like, "I'll make a set of 1300s." He said, "And you dial the stock car to, you know, plus or minus 2, which is what I try to do." He said, "And you put my injector and my data in there, and it will work." And I said, "Well, if you're going to do that, I want to try the FICs." And I tried 2 or 3 other brands.
Yeah.
His and the ID 1300s were the only ones that followed suit. The data was right. They would idle within 20%.
Yep.
The FICs did not. And I don't know if they do now, but so basically they made these injectors with data so good that it fit the 127 profile.
Yep.
That's why the 1300s were never an issue.
I've always had very good luck with any ID car. I mean, my Camaro runs their 2600s.
I'm pretty sure ID is the only one. They can crucify me if they want. That actually paid to have that real data made.
Yeah.
And I mean, they're always spot on. I think their whole X, X2, and XDS is confusing as shit. And you should really clarify that. He does if you message him, but it's like, you know, a lot of people put the X data in and it's an X2 or it's an XDS, which the data is the same.
Yep.
So that's a little confusing, but once you get into the bigger ones and you're running out of that and you're having to go scale and you're trying to put this in a car that doesn't need that kind of injector, you start running into those idle issues and the smells and the lack of control.
Well, that's what I thought that's why I thought my injectors on my car when I got it were pretty big. They were 1300s on a car with a pulley and a tune and.
But it almost seems like everybody kind of came together on that 1300.
Yeah, but also it's one of those deals where, like, buy it if you plan to do a cam and ported blower, you might as well.
Honestly, I think the biggest thing was that they would start dropping fuel pressure, and the Cadillac is very adaptive to that, and it'll bring the injector duty up to you can drop 40 psi of fuel pressure, and as long as you have headroom on that injector, your fuel trim will be dead on still. It's a very good operating system.
Yeah.
I think that's why people are doing the 1300s. That's honestly why I was doing them at first, just because I was like, it's headroom, it's safety. A lot of these people, they'll be like on the edge of fuel system, and then they'll hit like 40-degree air, 30-degree air, and then tank the fuel pressure and potentially hurt a motor. So in the back of my mind, you know, I'm all for making the cars fast.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be doing this for 13, 14 plus years if cars are sitting there blowing up.
Well, and the cost to get, you know, an 850 or 1000 to the 1300, it's like, you might as well, if you plan to do anything else, you might as well go a little bigger now. So I get that.
Well, but if you notice that the better injectors, they do cost more, but you are getting a better product. But the fact that people think $400 for a 2000 cc injector was a smart idea blows my mind.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I'm a big fan of save your money where you can, but when it comes to fuel and tuning, you better be on point. Because if you miss those two, it doesn't matter what you put in it, it won't live.
Oh, I mean, if anybody's ever seen a hole melted clean through a cylinder head.
Yeah. That was my issue with the 2000s, but it's like there was a wave of those a few years back, and I saw it again like a year ago. It just keeps coming back to haunt us.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm kind of digging the LT stuff, because they're not touching them. But that's a whole nother can of worms. because
running
they come
out
out
of injector on that.
Well,
deal.
they come out with the 30% injectors and the 60% overs. And so let's say idle pressure on that is 800, 900 PSI. So you put the 30s in there, and they're okay. They'll kind of work. You just move the flow rate a little bit. But they had an issue at higher pressure, they would lock out. So they found a workaround of that, and they tell you got to lower the pressure. So I'm thinking, okay, well, it's 30% over. I can run the factory injector at 31, 3,200 PSI if I want. I usually just keep it around the 29, but you can.
Yeah.
But I'm having
When
to
we're
lower.
talking direct injection here for anybody wondering.
Yeah, sorry, direct
it's
injection.
a lot of PSI.
Yeah.
It's like a diesel stuff at that point.
So if you've got an injector that flows 140 pounds an hour at 2,900 PSI, and you got a 30% over, that you can only run at 21, or it'll lock out, or it has issues, or they say it flattens the disc or something like that in there. Well, isn't that the same injector now? 21 versus 29, and potentially 32 if I wanted it to.
Interesting. Yeah.
So I was like, okay, the 30% I think is give or take whatever. The 60 comes out. I put it in the car, fighting fuel trims. I'm like, oh, well, I can't understand what the issue is. I put the data in, and they're like, oh, we'll drop your injection pressure down. And I'm like, how low do I really got to drop? Man, I was 100, 200 PSI. And in my mind, because I always think of how everything's working, if you go from 800 or 900 PSI at idle to 150 to 200, you can't convince me that that's not just spitting the fuel in there.
Yeah.
There's no
crazy.
way that that's atomizing properly.
Yeah.
If factory, on a cold start, they'll 2,900 at idle, and then they'll come back up and they'll come down to 800 or 900. But I drop them down to 100, and you can just feel it's dirty. But they swear that I'm wrong and they're right, and I'm like, that's cool, but I don't want to run it. And then later, come to find out, they're pretty much just a drilled stock injector. And I'm like, okay, so we're back in the fast days.
Yeah.
So
you got to take the whole freaking intake off and the whole blower off.
Oh, yeah.
Them. They're not just you can't just do them in like 5 minutes like regular injectors.
Yeah, it's just, but, more DI versus port was another big crazy window for me that Thule had told me when he was doing the R&D. He made a little video on it. I think it's on YouTube too. But so they would run, he told me, when you have to add fuel through the port, whatever fuel comes through the port takes away from air that could have come through the port.
Yeah.
So in my mind, I'm like, how much is that? And he's like, well, if you add 15% of fuel, that is 15% of air. And I'm like, that's crazy. So we had an NA Camaro, and we're at the track. And I'm pretty much about 20, 30% on port. We didn't have to have it. We were using that when we would put the special fuel in it. And we were just on E85 this day.
Yeah.
So let's say 20%, I think it was around there. 20% on port, 20% out of the DI. This car would run 570s, 560s. The other way around. It was running like a 560, 570 when we had the port off on E85. Adding the port, the car lost 3/10.
Yeah, because now you can't fit as much volume of air in the cylinder.
3/10.
Yeah.
In a 5-second car.
It's a lot of air.
So to me, I'm like, I run port, but I run it because I have to.
Yeah.
Do I think a 60% giant injector would be fantastic? Absolutely. I would totally love that because we're going to make more power all DI, but at the expense of a car that runs terrible or something that, I don't trust. I had a set of 30s in a car. I did the 60 to 130 in it, dead on air fuel, dead on everything. Took those out, put the factory ones back in, and almost a half second faster.
Yeah, there's that trade-off. There's always a trade-off with everything in these cars. You put too big of a turbo, takes longer to spool.
Yeah, it's just...
there's always something there. You can't have your cake and eat it too, right?
Right. It's just... It's crazy, these little things that there's so much really out there. But back to the parts selection thing, that's our new 200s.
Yeah.
Is I'll get these cars with 30s and 60s, and they're like, man, it kind of just runs terrible. And I'm like, well, I did tell you to take that out. Or that Lingenfelter pump. I hate to be like that, but that Lingenfelter big bore pump, I've made more power without it than I have with it. And I've seen, I can't tell you how many motors that whatever they're doing to that pump, it's pissing fuel into the motor. It leaks. And I've called them 3 different times, and I'm told, oh, well, we haven't seen that before. I'm like, well, this is number 2 for me.
Yeah, so for people that don't know, on the LTs, it's cam-driven fuel pump, and it's a piston-driven on the back, like, plunger-driven on the back of the cam. The last cam lobe is a little triangle that drives the fuel pump. So if it leaks in right on top of the cam.
Yep, which it immediately takes out the lifter plunger and everything there.
Yeah.
But it starts filling the engine with fuel. And most people don't catch it until it's too late.
Yeah.
But I've seen that a bunch of times. And it just seems like these aftermarket options, it's getting back to the testing. Nobody tests anything. So they just put this stuff together, and they just want us to figure it out. Or they'll find a workaround, and they'll be like, "Well, just put this in the tune." And I'm like, well, "No, because that's not the proper way to do this."
Yeah.
And what are we to do from there? Mm-hmm. So the whole mod selection thing is a very sensitive subject.
Yeah, it's tough. I always tell people to talk to their tuner first because they've probably dealt with these problems, and you may have surfed the forums all you want, but your tuner probably knows best. And they may not accept you if you buy the wrong parts. So maybe talk to them first. It's always a good move.
Yeah, I mean, and you would spend less money that way because bank on, we've already bought the wrong parts. Mm-hmm. We've already tested it. We've eaten that expense. So if you just ask, that's why I do like a consultation on my site. I'm like, just do a consultation.
Yeah.
It's $50. $50, I will tell you what you need, how to make the power that you want, and you can bank on it. It's going to do what I'm telling you it's going to do because it's done it in multiple other cars in multiple different areas.
Naturally.
But you get most of the people there. But, I mean, these guys are $80,000 cars. And they'll be like,
$50 for
they'll be like, well, the internet told me this. I'm like, man, come on. Just do it right. But when they do them right, I'll tell you, they're impressive.
Across the board, they're all good cars. Like, they're all enjoyable cars, and the C7s are coming down in price a lot.
Yep.
It's going to be a really good entry level. I mean, now every car, now the new Camry is, $60,000. So it's like,
I was going to say everything's so crazy.
Yeah. So
expensive.
you see a C7 that's like 35. You're like, that's actually pretty cheap. And they get good gas mileage factory.
Yeah. Mine gets, even modded, mine gets in the mid 20s on the interstate. Not in town. In town, I might get mid 2 to 3.
Well, they're aerodynamic. They get good.
They get good fuel mileage. I mean, we drove it from Houston all the way to Orlando for the Cadillac Attack race, and we averaged, I think, 24 miles to the gallon.
They do awesome. I think people don't realize that about those cars.
They're efficient. Yeah. So.
Well, good deal, man. Where can people find you at? Where can we send some traffic potentially?
Instagram, Facebook, Puerto Rico.
On the beach. Hurricane season getting ready.
I'm going to run for that one. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to hang out for that. But
you thought Houston was bad.
Yeah. Well, I was there for Harvey.
Yeah.
And Katrina.
Well.
In New Orleans.
All of those hit Puerto Rico before they hit.
That's true. That's true.
What people don't talk about is they all had to hit Puerto Rico to get to Houston.
Yeah. Don't wish that on me. But
I'm in the same boat. I'm right here, right on the coast.
But yeah, I mean, pretty much anywhere on social media or, traveling around because, we pretty much travel everywhere.
To get a hold of you for tuning, just reach out somehow.
Yep.
Smoke signal.
Whatever
it is.
Yeah, that'll work.
Somehow. But good deal, man. Thanks for coming on. This was awesome. This is a really, really enlightening conversation, I'd say.
Yeah.
I had a lot of fun, so.
I appreciate it.
Any closing words there, man? That's about it?
That's about it, man.
Good deal.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, we'll talk to you later. Thanks for watching.